All right, looks like we are recording. And guys, I'm so excited to have on the program Roger Yates. And Roger, you get the honored distinction of being my first interview of 2026. So congratulations on that. And it's a real honor to have you on the program. I know you know from like my interview with Ronnie Lee that I've had a lot of interest in the history of the animal rights movement, and you were there for so many pivotal moments. And so it's real exciting to get a chance to talk to you. And I have to say, and I think you probably also know this, that I also have a lot of ignorance about the movement, which is even someone like me who's I guess over the past year or two has really had an interest in learning some of the history. I still feel like I'm at the tip of the iceberg. And looking into you, Roger, and learning about your history kind of reinforced that for me because there was so much mentioned. We were just talking off camera about, your Wikipedia page, and having looked through like your Wikipedia page, there was so much in there that was stuff that was new to me. So I hate to be very boring and just like, start an interview boring, but I wonder if you could just kind of take me back to your early years, and then we can go from there and start talking about this. But before that, I'll just introduce, you're a sociologist. You were a press officer for the Animal Liberation Front over the years. You do this podcast, which was how I came about you, with Ronnie Lee, the founder of the ALF, called Still Alive, which I highly recommend people check out. Also want to say
that title was Ronnie's idea, by the way.
Gotcha. I also want to say that Christmas stream that you guys did together, that was one of my favorite things. I really love the warmth, like the genuine warmth that you guys have for each other. You have such a chemistry. It was really a joy to sort of vicariously experience that with you guys as you guys were having that conversation. So I really enjoy those chats that you guys have. But nice to have you here, Roger.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jeremy. And well, actually, I was wondering, what does it feel like to be in the Fourth Reich? You must be under stress at the moment, yeah?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
The way that I deal with it, though, which I wish my family would kind of adopt what I do, and maybe it's not the best way of dealing with it, but I mean, it's going to be happening whether or not I'm, looking at it, or, and so in a way, you have to sort of insulate yourself, and you don't need to like follow every development and get riled up over it. It's important to know what's going on, but yeah, that's how I'm dealing with it.
It's like a balance, isn't it? I've got
For sure.
I got a medal for playing football, soccer, for you, I suppose, from 1970, and I was wondering whether I should send it over to Pennsylvania.
If you want to get on our good side, apparently. I mean,
yeah, apparently that's what you got to do, isn't it? No?
Apparently.
The vegan buttering up.
Yeah, well, maybe we should, offer some kind of like, award for kindness towards animals or something like that, and present it to Donald Trump so he will do something good for animals.
Yeah, well, yeah. Don't hold your breath. That's all I can say to that.
Yeah, no. But yeah, it is stressful. I'm sure it's actually stressful for the rest of the world too, because America plays such an outsized role in things. But not to get too far in the weeds on politics, but I mean, we're doing a good job of making ourselves a rogue state, a country that nobody wants to deal with, including our allies, and especially our allies, it seems like.
Mm. Do you think the World Cup will go? I mean, I know we don't want to do this, but do you think the World Cup will go ahead, and do you think the midterms will go ahead?
Yeah, I think the midterms will go ahead. I don't really have any special insight and knowledge into that. I just seen Donald Trump attempt, to subvert the process before, and he can definitely make it very messy. I hope that those, sort of scaffolding, if you will hold of our democracy. As far as the World Cup, I have no insight into that. Maybe it'll be a situation where America gets penalized or something for,
well,
I mean, I've been watching the Australian Open tennis, and you know, you still see the Russian players without their nation logo because of their invasion of the Ukraine. And I mean, so, you know, certain, you know, like sports bodies do take actions like that. And it's interesting. This has been going on for, I guess, at least like 4 years that's been the case.
Well, it's going to be an interesting year anyway.
For sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess we better get to what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was the question again? The early years or something? Or
Yeah. Just essentially, if you could just take me back. You know, I saw a video on your channel, and by the way, I should mention, you know, you have this great YouTube channel too that I'll put the link to, and people should check out. You have a lot of information on there, and one of your early videos, I guess it was from about 8 years ago, was you sort of telling your vegan story, and that's a lot, you know, where a lot of these conversations start for, you know, just like how people came to veganism and animal rights. And what sort of like really reinforced those ideals for them. And I want to mention, you know, I haven't talked much about Tom Reagan on this channel, and you've talked to me a lot about Reagan already, and so I want to take that opportunity to talk about him.
Good, yeah, because he's a neglected figure in the movement, which is deeply ironic. But you know, when it comes to my beginnings of it, I always tell that, well, there's a couple of strands to it. I remember as a kid, I had this kind of weird feeling about this issue of fairness. You know, that's not fair, this is fair, that kind of stuff. And I do remember at my high school, jumping from table to table to let wasps out that the other kids were trying to kill. And so I was thinking, well, that's not fair. And why would you? And so I was trying to, as it were, liberate them. And I also remember that my sister, who's 8 years senior and also a long-term vegan, she used to collect for the conservation groups, you know, and I remember, you know, the rhino appeal or the elephant appeal and this kind of stuff. And these were envelopes, you know, on the mantelpiece, as it were. And there was a scandal. It coincided with a scandal involving the RSPCA in England. And it turned out that the CEO had kind of used lots and lots of the charity's money to buy carpeting or something for his office. So I thought to my sister, you know, how much of the donation that you send gets to the individuals you're trying to assist, right? And of course, she didn't know. And then, and this is 1977 now, then I saw in I think it was the New Musical Express, one of the music mags in Britain, they had a feature about anti-blood sports, and it talked about the hunt saboteurs. And the hunt saboteurs weren't asking for money, they were asking for action. And that immediately appealed to me. And that kind of tunneled me in to direct action more generally, in the same way that it happened with Ronnie. You know, our generation, the hunt saboteurs were very instrumental in terms of turning us on to issues, but also turning us on to activism. The only mysterious thing, because I know that when Ronnie talked to you, he talked about some people who are still sabbing, and I know some people who are still sabbing. That's a bit weird to me, because I remember distinctly driving to sabbing areas, and you know, the more I learned, I would look and I go, oh look, that's a farming unit, that's a pig unit. Oh look, that's a broiler shed. Oh look, there's a battery unit, you know, this kind of stuff. And then, oh, that's a laboratory. And so it made less and less sense, really, for me to go and spend an entire day trying to save one individual who might not have been killed anyway. So I was starting to wonder about the use of my time. And I know that you talked a lot with Ronnie about that, because for us, our attitude has changed, because we're thinking, well, it's a zero-sum game, you know, division of labor, kind of where best can we put our efforts. And that's what's kind of changed over the years for both of us, really.
Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like, from the early, kind of right from the start, you were thinking that way. When I got into the movement, I guess it was like 8 years ago at this point. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if I was that strategic at the time. It was sort of like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and try everything. I guess it was in a way strategic, but I was sort of thinking, at that time, it's all valuable. And I do believe it was valuable for me in my development, but certainly there were better uses of my time than other forms of activism. Um, but it's interesting that you had sort of gotten that mindset right from the get-go of like, how best to use my time.
I think I
Um,
was a bit of a student about it, to be honest, because I do remember, because like our mode of gaining information was to join the groups or have somebody uh, join the group or know somebody and that kind of stuff, and then you'd get their mags, and so you'd end up with all that. And I do remember reading the mags and actually having pen and paper trying to work out what all these kind of initials meant and stuff, RS, PCA, that kind of stuff.
mhm, mhm.
I4, what does that mean? And so, and so you mentioned history before, and it's a relief to me to see that you're interested in the history, because there's quite a lot of relatively recent vegans and they don't show any interest in the history. And sometimes they're quite hostile to it. And
Mhm.
I'm actually confused by that, because I don't understand why. I always say it's as though, if, say for example, there was a social movement called Marxism and you joined it and you weren't interested in the history, and somebody says, have you heard about this Marx guy? And you say, oh well, sod that, I'll just make up what Marx means. It doesn't make any sense to me. That,
Mhm.
it just doesn't.
I have a theory for that, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I think that it could be that some people aren't interested in it simply because they don't know how interesting it is. And they're worried that it's going to be, too academic or something. I'm not really sure. Um, because I guess the way that I started to get interested in the history was just seeing that there were so many people who just really put themselves on the line and had fascinating stories behind it. So in a way, it's like my interest in the movement almost comes from just like being interested in cool stories, in a way, because I think this may be the wrong reason, but there's just something, and we've talked. I've had some talks with now people from back in the day who warn against romanticizing stuff like the Animal Liberation Front, make it seem too distant, too inaccessible. But there was something very appealing about that to me, um, and I
But
think
it was accessible though, Jeremy. That was the success of it, is the fact that you could join it. It was easy to join. Well, you
right.
you couldn't you couldn't join it, but you could get involved. So
Mm,
there was kind of no rules. You didn't have to fill in any forms. You didn't have to wear a uniform, and all the rest of it. And so, and I do remember when you were talking to Ronnie, he was talking when he was talking about the punk band, but he was also talking about the ALF. He was talking about DIY culture. Now,
mhm.
that was very strong in those days. And as a sociologist, I studied DIY culture, and that seems to have gone now. You've got
Yeah.
much more of a feeling that you've got people hanging around to be told what to do. Now, that was alien to us. It was kind of, oh, there's a problem. Right, let's do, who wants to do something about it, kind of thing. And then what shall we do? And then you'd look around, see what was going on, and then you'd use that as a model, and then do your own thing. You wouldn't kind of slot into a system. And I think there's some of that going on now. That
Do you
people are
think
looking for a template or something.
Do you think that people doing hunt sabbing today, for instance, are sort of getting that crash course that you guys had back in the day of that DIY, boots on the ground, get your feet dirty, kind of mentality that so many of us in the modern animal rights movement lose because we're on our phones and our computers and doing online activism? And, you know, and really not getting out there very much?
I think it's obviously complicated because, I mean, it's to do with inquiring minds and all that. And the fact is, I suppose we always tend to think, again, Ronnie talked about this kind of like the pre-internet age. How did you do anything? You know that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And in some ways, in some aspects, it might have been a blessing because it meant that, if you were curious, you had to go and seek information out. It wasn't, you weren't getting, it wasn't washing over you all the time.
Yeah.
So that might have, in some ways, be a bit of a benefit. And I think that ultimately you'd have to put it down to trial and error back in those days.
Yeah.
And there's elements of that now, I'm sure, when people form a group and then get out on the street and all that, trial and error. But certainly sabbing was, and the experienced ones would obviously talk to the less experienced ones, and then you'd learn the routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a question that you actually posed to me watching someone's activism and wondering whether or not, I think you asked me, is the person overwhelmed? Is it too much information? And it kind of reminds me of like just this idea, like if I have like one book in front of me and that's all that I have, I want to read that book. But if I'm in a library with 1,000 books, around me or whatever, how many, then it may feel overwhelming. And the idea that I can finish something. I wonder, because you study sociology, I wonder if you have any insight on the psychology of that. I don't know if that's something you've kind of delved into.
Well, it'd have to be the social psychology, but I know what you mean. And of course, when people watch this, whenever it comes out, there's going to be, all these thumbnails at the side, distracting them, like all your other books, as it were. And so, in some ways, that's the downside of social media. In fact, I wrote, well, I put a film out about an influencer who's, in my opinion, doing damage to the movement. And this is about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I asked around because there was a joke at the end, and no one had seen it because, and it was like, I think it was about 16 minutes, the video, and nobody had got to the end of it.
Interesting.
It's as though you've got a pile of books and you read, the synopsis or something, or you read the first couple of chapters and then you put it to the side. And I think sometimes people go, oh, I'll come back to that. I mean, I've done that. I bet you have. Oh, I'll come back to that. And you don't, because,
right.
Yeah. So I think it's almost like we've got too much stuff now washing over us.
Yeah, I that definitely is true. I'm also a little dismayed by something you said that was like, I'm really grateful that you're interested in the history, which just goes to show that, like you explained, most people aren't. I find this kind of fascinating that I haven't really been in the movement very long. And it's almost like, someone like you or even Ronnie Lee, who I would expect to be kind of hard to reach. I would expect like there'd be reporters knocking on their doors, wanting to do interviews all the time. And there's almost like like you said, almost feeling of like gratefulness that someone wants to talk about this stuff. I find that really disturbing because of the fact that there is so much to talk about.
Well, I've been told over the many years that, the vegan movement was begun by Gary Yourofsky, and people are saying that with a straight face. And lately, it's Ed Winters that has started the vegan movement.
Right, right.
And then you said you're grateful that I'm grateful to you about being interested. But then I said some people are resistant to it. Now, there's a very established group now. When they first formed, I contacted them and said, welcome to the movement type of thing. And here's the good news. It's far more radical than you might think, and all that. And they told me to fuck off. They weren't interested. Right. And it was, and in fact, they had some ideas which were kind of, they were quoting people like Donald Watson, and it was wrong. They're getting all the years wrong and everything. And I said something about Tom Reagan from his 83 book. I said, well, he did write this. And he said, that's bullshit. So they'd already got a version of what they're into in their mind. And I was in danger of, putting the skids under it, I think. So they weren't interested.
Yeah, that's
so it was kind of like not interested, but sometimes resistant too.
I wonder if that's like a product of, a lot of, I guess, newer activists. I guess I can't really claim this anymore. I'm middle-aged now, but a lot of newer activists are on the young
side. Don't be saying that. Don't be saying that.
I know. but definitely on the younger side. And I wonder if there's just sort of a lack of curiosity, which is probably pervasive in our society at large. So it probably goes beyond the animal. I mean, obviously it goes beyond the animal rights movement, but yeah, I wonder if that's sort with this podcast, and I'm only reaching a handful of people, but that is sort of what I'm trying to do in a way, is to open this up and let people know just how fascinating these stories are by having guests like you on. And I mean, like, I didn't know this. I'm finding stuff out all the time. When I was looking back through your channel, I saw the video that you posted about Hillgrove, and how you had gotten injured at Hillgrove. And when I had Tom Harris on to talk about the Shack campaign, and he wrote that book, Your Neighbor Kills Puppies, about the Shack campaign. And the Hillgrove campaign was one of the wildest sounding protests that I ever read about. And I think he confirmed that for me. He said that a lot of people took part. And now maybe you can.
Well, there was a particular day when it got very, very heavy, which is because I ended up getting injured, as you said, and we subpoenaed the police footage, and including their helicopter footage. And we're talking about the 1990s. The footage was amazing because they were able to pan out and you'd see the entire place, and then they'd be able to zoom into an individual person.
Let me, not for people who don't know, let's give them a little background of what we're talking about so they understand what the Hillgrove campaign was about.
Yeah, well, there's a cat breeder for vivisection. It was called Hillgrove. I think it was it Farmer Brown? I think it might have been some stereotypical
all the details.
Stereotypical name. And so a kind of pressure campaign began, and it culminated with a national kind of hit really on it. And the house got smashed up. They had the compound where the cats were heavily defended by the police, and these big kind of walls that they'd constructed. It was a little bit like trying to get into Glastonbury now, that type of thing. And but the activists managed to breach the fence as well, and so there's a big stand-up. I think somebody lost their finger. I think I think their finger got broken off by the cops. I had my cheek busted in, and I still get streams from my eyes, actually, especially in cold weather. And that's because my sinus has always been a bit strange, because I was told I'd need an operation. And I said, I don't fancy that idea. And they said, well, you'd either have to have an operation or you'd have a caved in face. So this is the early days of the internet. And I was on a couple of forums, and I said, I've been recommended to have this particular operation, and people don't do it, because the idea was that they were gonna put a slit, cut here, and then they had to kind of like a spatula type thing or some plastic thing. They were going to put it inside and pull the broken cheekbone back out again.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
Yeah, but they said that you do a lot of damage to the nerves by cutting here, so don't do it. So I never did it.
Yeah.
So I think it's not too busted in. It doesn't matter at this age. So
what was your role during that campaign? Because you just took a shot to the face, and then you've also not come out of the movement unscathed. Done some prison time. I know we could talk about that as well. But what was your role during Hillgrove that got you,
Well,
smashed?
I mean, this is really bizarre because I went to hundreds, if not thousands, of demos, probably hundreds, but certainly hundreds, in the early 80s and throughout the 80s. And I went as a demonstrator, a protester and stuff. On this occasion, I was actually in between my MA and my PhD. So I went there because I was networking for my PhD, and I knew there's going to be loads of people that I knew, and I could just with everything going on, just kind of just do a bit of networking and everything. So it's so ironic because I went there as an academic on that particular occasion, and that's when I got the biggest injury that I've ever had. And yet I'd been on loads of demos without much. I mean, obviously I've been on SABs where I've been injured and stuff, and my life had been threatened a few times. There was one time when I was at the edge of a cover, which is a little wood, and there was one hunter telling me that if I came out of the cover, he was going to kill me. And there's another hunter saying if you don't get out of the cover, he was going to kill me. So I was in a bit of a tricky space. And luckily, because this is cub hunting, and luckily there was a woman with a babe in arms looking on, quite horrified to what's going on. And I think she kind of saved me from a big beating, really. Wow. Because they saw that she was looking, and then I just piss off kind of thing. Yeah. And so they let me go without getting the kicking that they were promising, kind of thing. Yeah. So there's a few of that, but the main injury was when I wasn't there as a demonstrator. So it's deeply ironic, really.
What do you think about when you bring up that, you getting hit in the face, the hunt sabbing and stuff? These are pretty intense situations. And I think maybe you can tell me your view of this, but I do think that we have a movement right now that trends towards safety. Like I feel like a lot of people kind of feel more fear than they feel the steel and the resolve that you guys seem to have back in the day, doing stuff like that. So is it just
spontaneity as well, Jeremy?
Spontaneity, yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of spontaneity. Now I think that the movement is more corporatized than I've ever known it. There's more careerists in it. There's more wages in it, and all the rest of it. And so often they've got their legal documents and all the rest of it, and they take things like duty of care, health and safety seriously. We didn't even know what that was. So right, I think it was a different time, really. And I suppose if you're employed now and you're making your living out of organizing demos and everything, you've got to factor in safety concerns, which tends to mean that you don't want people. I mean, Ronnie told you about the big anti-vivisection demos. I mean, we would go to a laboratory. Nobody would just stand outside. You'd rip the fences down and storm in. And that would be kind of standard. But I think it might even be kind of weirdly frowned upon now.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you definitely get criticism from some in the movement. Praise from some, criticism from others. I think people kind of like almost clamoring to see acts of selflessness now. I don't know how much that's ebbed and flowed over the years. But I'm sure some of those intense situations. How did you push through those? And were there ever moments for you where you were like, man, this is so tough. Like, I don't need this in my life. I could go to school. I could do all this kind of stuff. Were there ever moments where you were like, it's not worth it? Or, I'm just wondering where that steeliness comes from.
I don't know. It didn't happen for me. In fact, I mean, I kind of, it cost me 2 marriages, this movement, because I've always been, and even now I feel very defensive of the movement, but, and I never felt as though I had a right to burn out. And it was a question of just soldiering on. And also, in a weird way, because we talk about full-time activism now, but I mean, things back then were so weird in the sense that I remember being in Liverpool There's a little place called Dungeon Lane where there's 3 cottages, and we had those as a headquarters type thing, and it was just full on stuff all the time: grouse shooting, hair coursing, normal kind of sabbing, demos, all that kind of stuff, and then street kind of stalls and this kind of stuff. So it was literally full on. It was like you get up and you start until it was bedtime. And I mean, I remember people writing, reports for the Hunt Saboteurs at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was completely fun. It got to the stage where we would wake up and we'd say, "Is this a day for the court? Have we got a court case today?" Because there might be, because there's a few of us, there might be 9 court cases pending or something.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to go on one of those. So it was kind of full on in a way that I don't think modern activists can kind of quite get their head around. And it's almost like me looking back thinking, wow, did we really do that? It's almost like, I mean, that is bonkers kind of thing. But it really was. And I think part of it actually, Jeremy, was the fact that when I was down, this is 82, I remember somebody from the BUAV, British Unit for the Abolition of Vivisection, one of the volunteers, like myself, said, because we were on such a high and such a push and a peak of stuff, and I mean, there was like a six ALF actions per night in those days, and this person said, we'll have won in 10 years. We're going to win in 10 years. And nobody thought that she was saying something weird. We all thought, yeah, because we felt unstoppable. And in that sense, every hour was precious. You didn't want to take any time off. You certainly wouldn't go on holiday, or you wouldn't do any. You would just go write a campaign. I mean, if you went somewhere, it would be on business, and then you might have a bit of social life with it. But it was always the movement was that was the main thing we ever thought about. And there's a group of people, and going back to what we were saying before, they were kind of self-activated. They were running groups themselves. Ideas were bouncing around, and well, yeah, well, let's do it then, kind of thing. And it was kind of go type stuff. And I don't want to romanticize that, but it was genuinely full on all the time.
Do you think that people in the movement in general are too comfortable with animal exploitation? Because I mean, kind of what I'm hearing from you is like, maybe you guys had a sense like that you were going to win. And I feel like a lot of people maybe today, and maybe even myself included at times, just kind of feel like we're playing the long game. We know this is going to take a long time. So that leads to us taking time off, doing this, doing that, because we don't feel like we're actually going to win. And I think there's a big difference between starting something with the belief that you're going to win, or I mean, win in the short term.
There's a heck of a lot in what you just said there, but I mean, like, yeah, we did think we were going to win. It was going to be short order, and then you do realize you're in for the long term. And I think that that is what's increased the amount of welfarism in the movement, in the fact that a lot of people, I think, get a bit frustrated with vegan education outreach, in the sense that the payoff is not so in your face. And I think, and we've looked at it, we've spoken to a few people over this, like Jake Conroy, you won't mind me saying, he says this openly, some people have got this kind of need for victories, and groups certainly do. We've had a big victory and all this kind of stuff. And in some senses, it's led to a bit of dishonesty in the movement. I mean, a recent example I would cite would be the Polish fur farm ban, right? Now, that was presented as a huge victory. And yet, when you ask people what it means, they have no idea. What is the consequence of that ban, or the English one, or any one you can think of, the Irish one? What happened after that? And they don't know. They know the headline, And I think they picture in their mind a fur farm with a closed down sign on it. But what they don't know is that the minks get transferred to Russia or China, and they don't know, although they've complained about those particular countries for having, poor animal welfare standards, if that's a criteria that we're even interested in. And then the third problem is that just about in each and every case that I know of, the fur farmers are now multimillionaires because of the compensation, right? And so Ronnie looked at that. He did a bit of research. What do the fur farmers do with their compensation? And they open pig farms, and they buy racehorses and this kind of stuff. And so there is a bigger picture to these victories than is known. And I think it's almost in the interest of some of the prime movers and the groups to hide the reality behind things like bans and stuff. I mean, Ronnie talked on your show about, the hunting ban in Britain next to useless. There's a hunting ban in Ireland about the one and only deer hunt. They've found a way around it. So they're still hunting. In England, Scotland, Wales, they're still hunting. We used to think that when the hunt ban came in, we thought, well, the hunt saboteurs will be transformed from saboteurs to monitors of hunts, and we'd be just on the bell to the cops, that they're hunting, send the lads round kind of thing, and they'd all get nicked and all that. And then the kind of reality was like a cold bucket of water thrown over you. I mean, the police said, well, we're not going to police it. We can't, so it's not our priority. There's lots of humans being harmed, so we're not going to send 60 officers to try and, arrest the field, or even the hunt staff.
Right.
They're just not going to do it. So that didn't work. Then they found all the ways around it. Plus the fact there was loopholes built in, and that brings another problem, is the fact that there's loopholes built in because the legislation was drafted by a speciesist legislation or legislator, right? And so we're never going to get animal rights through the current political system. And I've had some really interesting conversations over the years, because my position is we have to have cultural change before we can get the kind of politics that will be anything meaningful, which is why things that are called animal rights legislation, it just slides straight into welfare. Politicians can't deliver animal rights. Animal rights is far too radical for politicians. They can only deliver little bits of welfare, and even then they'll renege on it, or it can get revised and all the rest of it. So I think that we're a long way away from going to parliaments and asking them for things, because they're just going to chuck a couple of welfare crumbs off the table and go, is that good enough? And it's a million miles away from animal rights. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I used to cover politics, mostly state politics, which in the United States, and I got real disenchanted with the whole process, like even from a more of an up close vantage point. Then people just having their justified cynicism about the political system. A couple things about what you were just talking about. One is just that sort of frustration that people will have to not be able to see their work. I can relate to that because having done the radio work, a lot of times we put out a story or something, goes out to the world, and then we have no idea the impact. And there is this weird psychological need to sort of grasp and understand the impact that you're having. And with vegan advocacy or animal rights activism in general, you often, as you have to be okay with not always knowing. It's funny. I'm reading the Edward Abbey book, the Monkey Wrench Gang, which, I know inspired a lot of the radical environmental activists and stuff. And I think it's funny. I just bring this up because one of the characters in the book, they've done this big sabotage, of all these bulldozers, their first like sabotage. And the character in the book, they're all like going back to their Jeep. And the character says, no, I'm going to stay. I need to see this. I need that personal satisfaction, even though that's very ill-advised thing to do, obviously, but we do kind of need that like psychological like boost in a way, or we have to steel ourselves to be okay with not knowing it. And
but it explains a lot though, Jeremy, doesn't it? Because
yeah.
if you close a fur farm down, then it's physically closed down and you can see that. And
Right.
there's your victory. If somebody begins to live vegan because you've spoken to them online, it's invisible, which is exactly why AV came up with the tally system. They came up with their tally system, and then they had to radically revise it because they realized that it was being distorted in the sense that they would do a cube, and then they'd meet a vegan calf, and then how many did you get, and they would do this tally, right? And you ended up going, oh, we've been out for 3 hours and we've got 67 new vegans. And then of course eventually people like Bashir said, well, this is not really real, is it? So we're going to have to figure out a different way of tallying our successes because they're more invisible in the vegan sphere. And I think therefore it's more difficult for people to really latch onto it.
Yeah.
Like if you go sabbing and you save a fox, there's one individual and you think, right, I've saved her. I've been in situations where I know for a fact that we've saved an individual. Right. And obviously on a raid, because you actually carry them out of the building that you're talking about. But in terms of vegan education, it's kind of like latent and underground almost,
Yeah. I know you've been critical of AV. I would just point out one thing that that sort of like shift. You've mentioned sort of the victories and how we need to sort of be honest about them. I actually think that that's kind of a point for them attempting to be a little more honest about what they were actually out there doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I wonder, this example you brought up of the Polish fur farm, and this idea, like we need to sort of be honest about what was accomplished here. But is it your view that it's a good thing that fur farms were banned in Poland? Do you think ultimately that's a good thing, or, because in terms of like what you can actually accomplish legislatively, we, as you rightly pointed out, we're only going to get crumbs here and there.
But it doesn't make a difference. And the thing is, the group can't say we've had a moderate success, which ultimately doesn't make any difference. They can't write that. So they've got to write we've had a huge success. And I've seen some of your content where you're talking about these things. But ultimately, it doesn't make a difference. If the trade has gone to China or to Russia and the sales are the same, but just it's kind of like moving the pieces around on a chessboard.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's the same. And then the added thing, which always gets to me, is the fact that we've made these people into multimillionaires. And there's campaigners calling them for years. It takes 15 years to close a fur farm down, calling them animal abusers. And then you go, here we are, 5 million euro. And how does that work?
Yeah. Well, I guess to push back a little on that, I guess some of them may go and open up a pig farm, but some of them may just want to get out of it completely. Do you worry? Like, I wonder. We had this, like phrase a lot, especially like I remember when Obama was trying to pass Obamacare, and he was having a huge trouble getting that passed because some people wanted him to go all in on this way, some people wanted him to back off this way, and ultimately what passed was in my view, and not to get political, a very flawed piece of legislation. But ultimately legislation that did some good. So I wonder, for someone, say, if they're working on getting a ban on fur farms in Poland, and they say, well, in this legislation, we're going to offer some money for you guys to get out of the business. Do you worry? And I guess I would worry that we're not allowing the pragmatism that could actually get something done if we have sort of like a hard line. What do you think?
I think it's on this one. I think it's to do with division of labor. Now, I think I did a recent Substack on this. Is that if there are vegan activists, which there are, who won't do vegan outreach, and there are some of those, but they will do pressure campaigns and they will do single issues, then I don't want them to stop doing that. But if there are vegan activists who will do vegan outreach, I don't want them to get diverted. So I think we can have a division of labor, because there's more of those anyway than there are of the vegans who are willing to do vegan outreach. We're very few and far between. I think we get a very distorted view, and this is an interesting sociological point, in the sense that people have started saying things like, oh, we've been doing vegan outreach for generations now and it hasn't worked. This is not true. Vegan outreach is this century only. It kind of spluttered into life from the mid-90s with the group Vegan Outreach and all that. But in terms of what we now understand as vegan outreach, this is this century only. And the national groups fought tooth and nail against it, right? They were resistant to it. And even when they accepted it, they said, well, we'll have to present it as a diet, okay, which is still a problem now. And so, yeah, we've still got this ongoing situation. And then to the extent that we do now have vegan outreach, and we could say that for a lot of people, veganism is the moral baseline of the movement, that Francione kind of line. The thing is, there's not ever been very much of it. And it's also been far spread and not very frequent. There's never been very much. It's been in the major cities every now and again. But, in terms of towns, villages, it's not there. This is why Ronnie keeps saying, I can't remember if he said this on your show. He said, we need vegan education all the time and everywhere. And we've never come even close to that. Not even close. So I don't want vegans to be diverted off.
Yeah.
And so kind of like, please, vegans, I do know why. I do know why that the reducitarians and the vegetarians ask the vegans for support, is because the vegans are seen as the activists. Because, like a vegetarian activist, it sounds weird, right? Whereas a vegan activist doesn't. So we're the activists. So if you think of reducitarian, vegetarian, vegan, we're the activists. So they want us on board.
Yeah.
Which means that we've got to do other than vegan stuff. Now, I don't like that. There's not many of us doing it already. Don't take us away from the bit that we're already doing.
Yeah, I think it's funny because when I got into the movement, I kind of had this idea of like just trying everything. And then I got sort of involved in different groups, and I sort of straddled both of these worlds. And so I felt like very often at times I would be defending vegan activism to the pressure campaigners, and then defending the pressure campaigns to the vegan activists.
I think I've seen you do that. I've seen you do that on your show. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have, when I got in the movement, I saw a lot of division, and so there's a difference between like, productive division and like destructive division. And I've always, at least with my channel, I've always tried to have the goal of like bringing the worlds together. One of the things that I've sort of realized is that everybody's so opinionated that it's been difficult to bring people to a certain idea. So one of the things, and this could be wrong or right, but I've kind of figured if somebody is hardcore in their pressure campaign mode or hardcore in their vegan activism mode, that's where they're going to be.
Mm.
So where I've tried to kind of do is just like make sure that we're friends still and still like working together in a way. It's not always working,
but there is an answer to that. I mean, the answer to that was kind of formalized, if you like, by Francione in the 1990s, which was, and Steve Best talked about this, which is kind of like alliance politics. So, you know, you've got people doing different things, but they can, depending on what it is, be in alliance with each other. And then the only thing then that is crucial is that the component parts of the alliance need to be able to maintain their particular claims making, right? Because that's what they want. This is what they want to say to the public. This is what they want to say to the world, kind of thing. And so you don't want to be curtailed and have to kind of read somebody else's script. You want to say what you want to say. And so long as the different parties in a alliance can tolerate that, then it should work. The real problem is quite often it doesn't. In fact, I got a very early. We once did a TV debate in Liverpool, and the Hunt Saboteurs was there, and the League Against Cruel Sports was there, and the Hunt Saboteurs spokesperson, who was called Fiona Calendar at the time, she had a "Fishing is a blood sports" badge on, and the top guy from the League Against Cruel Sports, asked her to take it off because they didn't have an official position on fishing. And in fact, the guy who proposed the hunting ban in Britain was somebody who used to go fishing, right? So you know, there's a lot of things, and we were saying to Fiona, no, keep it on. If the journalist picks up on it and say, well, you know, the Hunt Saboteurs here have got the fishing thing, and you don't, what's going on? Well, that's for them to explain. You know, you don't need to back down on your position. And that's true. You know, you mentioned with Ronnie this idea of lobbying. You talk about we don't lobby. Well, the League Against Cruel Sports lobbied to get the hunting ban by taking MPs out for steak dinners.
Right.
So lobbying in a species
it's ugly. Yeah. This kind of I don't know, maybe you've kind of answered this already, but like say you're talking to 15-year-old Roger Yates, but you're 15-year-old Roger Yates today without all the wisdom that you have, but you're talking to him and he's a brand new vegan or a brand new activist. What would you advise 15-year-old Roger Yates to go into? What do you think would be the best use of his time with all the energy that he has?
Well, I agree with you that if somebody's suddenly got a hard on about some particular thing, then go for that, right?
Right. Yeah.
But the overarching thing I say to everybody is that our number one target, and I don't think this is disputable, is cultural speciesism, because it affects everything we do. It affects the likelihood of success of the single issues. It affects the likelihood of success of the pressure campaigns. It affects the laws that we get, if we even bother going to get them. So cultural speciesism is the number one target. And if we can't do anything about cultural speciesism, say we came to the conclusion, and some vegans do this, that cultural speciesism cannot be beaten, then what they tend to do is say, well, okay, so that means we've got to come down a notch or two and get into welfare and get into this and get into the. My attitude is, no, we need to stick with challenging cultural species, because that's our big target. If that came down, everything else comes with it. It's not a question of taking bricks from a wall until it falls down. You're destroying the wall at one go. But it is the big thing. It's a big, hard thing to do. But it seems to me that someone's got to do that part of it. And the only ones that will do it are vegan activists. So again, we know our target. We've got our methodology. let's do our thing. Division of labor. If somebody wants to go off and do Camp Beagle, let them. And it's as simple as that. Division of labor.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe this is a good chance to a good segue to talk about Tom Reagan, because you've mentioned several times that like the movement mistreated him. That in his later years, maybe he felt kind of beaten down.
Yeah.
I actually don't really know what you're referring to when you talk about that, like
okay,
how he was treated.
It's interesting, really, because his age was against him, and also the fact that the internet was a bit too late for him too. So by the time I was kind of interacting with Reagan, he was just really rehashing his ideas by then. But then he did start. See, there's a time in the 1990s. So it all percolated through in the 80s. He ended up at the British Institute in 89, and he took part in an animal rights debate, and the audience was 1 million people, and the team won it, and it was Andrew Lindsay, Tom Reagan, and your mate Richard Ryder. So they were on the animal side of things, right? And they won the debate, but he gets involved then with Francione, and Francione, if you like, kind of radicalized Reagan. At the same time, Reagan's rationality, not that Francione isn't, but kind of like, knocked a few of the rough edges off, say. But so they worked as a really kind of good team. When it rolls round to 92, you've got Reagan and Francione working on what would become the abolitionist approach. And they approached the Animals Agenda, which was a big, powerful magazine at the time. And they ended up doing a point counter movement thing. So they made the case for vegan education, concentrating on that and concentrating on moral consistency. That your end has got to be driven by the moral consistency of your means, right? The person who opposed that was Ingrid Newkirk, and she said that she was going to go into bat for welfare. And there was a big argument in those days, this is like the 90s, between what's called two-track activism, which is what you kind of tried in a way, and one-track activism. And it was kind of like, don't put all your vegan eggs into one basket, which is vegan education. And Francione was very strong. No, we need everyone to go for vegan education. There's hardly any of it going. We need the movement to focus on that. We don't need anything else, because if we win there, everything else comes down as well, which again is true. And so that happened. But by the time you get to 1996, the welfarists had kind of reasserted their power in the movement. And Francione says that they were subject to loads and loads of bullying, and Reagan couldn't cope with it. His personality couldn't cope with it. I mean, he was a very serious, award-winning professor. Now, Francione was a kind of New Yorker, and it was, oh, fuck you kind of thing. So he was equipped, right?
Yeah.
Reagan wasn't. And so Reagan kind of backed down and thought, well, let's try and work for animal rights, abolitionism within the movement. Francione came out with a series of books saying that ain't going to work. And so Reagan kind of capitulated and compromised. Francione didn't. And then Francione left the movement and claims that his movement is a counter movement to the movement that me and you are in, right? Because he'd say that we're in an animal welfare movement. And I'd say there's quite a lot in what he's got to say there. But Reagan kind of, because of his personality, couldn't really do the kind of FU type thing to the movement that he loved. He loved the animal rights movement. And he said in the revision of the Case for Animal Rights, he fought he'd started the animal rights movement, you know, because he had the problem of Peter Singer. Peter Singer got in first. And so, you know, I mean, you know the story. Ryder came up with speciesism, and then Singer translated that into a radical version of animal welfare, right? Obviously, Reagan wouldn't do that, and neither would Joan Donaire, and neither would Gary Francione. But Singer was first. He got in first. He was 8 years ahead. All the groups did that. Peter adopted Peter Singer. And worse than that, because I had a petition against Peter. It's so weird. Because they kept characterizing animal liberation as an animal rights text. It's a book of animal rights philosophy. And you know the person who said it wasn't? Peter Singer said it wasn't. Peter Singer got fed up. He complained bitterly. Stop calling me animal rights. I don't believe in rights. I don't think that rights is a good basis for a social movement. I'm not animal rights. He's got, I mean, he's on film saying that. He's got book reviews saying that. I'm not animal rights. Peter say, oh, yes, you are. And so even now, if you look at the US version of Peter, I think they've only got one philosophy book, which is Animal Liberation. And in the description, they'll call it an animal rights philosophy book, which is a lie, which Ingrid knows it's a lie. But for some reason, she still keeps putting this out, even though the author says it's a lie. It's so bizarre. So we're so attached to animal welfare and utilitarianism that animal rights, it had to die. It had to be marginalized. It was strangled at birth by the animal welfare movement, and Reagan was left swinging in the wind until his sad, kind of tragic death. Reagan got chucked out. Francois got chucked out. Reagan just kind of fizzled out, and it's so sad.
Well, it may make you even sadder to know that, but what not surprise you that, you know, well, so it was Earthlings that turned me vegan. So I was already vegan. But when I looked up, you know, what are books about animal rights? Of course, the first book that popped up was Animal Liberation. So the first book that I ever read about all this was Animal Liberation. And by the way, I think it's a great text. I mean, I think, you know, I do think it has some issues. Obviously, I'm not a utilitarian. I don't agree with everything that Peter Singer said. I think partly.
But Jeremy, let me cut across you. Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah. Why does the entire movement lie about animal liberation being an animal rights book when it's not, and the author said it's not? Why?
I don't know, and I have a question for you. Well, one, I think the title is so strong, Animal Liberation, which, you know, maybe is a slightly misleading title, perhaps. I don't want to say that because that's, you know, his work. But, you know, I'm interested. You've described you feel this protectiveness of the movement. And I also kind of go back, you talked about your sister and how she was giving money to these, like, you know, Save the Rhino kind of groups. And it seemed to me like you worried on her behalf that she was kind of getting taken for a ride. And so, like, almost right from the get-go, you had I
think you're right. You'd make a good psychoanalyst because I think that is true.
Yeah,
I mean, you got a journalist background, right? But I think that is true. I've always had a problem with careerist in the movement, and I came to the conclusion because of certain interaction I had with certain people that some people see a cause, and they see a cause, and they see a battle. Some people see a cause and they see a career, and I've never fully trusted the career ones. That is not to say that I'm opposed to wages. That's not what I'm saying. But careerism in the movement, I don't think has done much favors for a radical movement. It's moderated what veganism means. For example, we've now got loads and loads of groups. I've always had this thing. If you got all the staff members of all the groups and you lined them all up with a little sign saying what their job was and how much they got paid, we'd be absolutely staggered by the amount and the amount of duplication, because there's loads and loads and loads of duplication in the movement. And so where you need duplication, is in the grassroots, not the national groups.
Right.
It'd be okay for a group 20 miles away from another to duplicate each other's work. They're 20 miles away from each other, and that's fine. But not in the national thing, where the only difference between their material is their logos. We took their logos off their leaflets.
Yeah. Do you when you mention your sort of distrust for some of the people who've made careers and stuff, do you question their motivations, their intentions? Do you think their motivations are to help animals, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they get suckered into a system. I mean, I'm a sociologist. I know the power of socialization processes, and I've got a couple of lectures on that. But also, you've got the general socialization that everybody goes through, and we are socialized as animal-loving animal users. That's our childhood socialization, right? Then if you go into your business, you get socialized by that as well. There's lots of different socializing agents. But in other words, if somebody comes in, take Earthling Ed, Joey Carlstrom, they come into the movement is drenched in animal welfare language. So they start talking animal welfare language. I mean, there's two examples. I mean, like Joey's favorite word is cruelty, which is an RSPCA word. Ed talks about that veganism is about reducing suffering, which it isn't. That's another RSPCA idea. And so they end up with a distorted version of what it could be, as if they came into a more radical movement that maintained its radical origins. The only problem is social movement theory is against that, and therefore against me, because social movement theory says that as soon as the movement takes off, let's say we've taken off, and we did so from 2015, say, the vegan movement takes off. The danger then is that you get loads of people coming into the movement, they're all flooding in, and they don't have the same values of the people who started it. And that's exactly what has happened to the vegan movement. And it's exactly what you could say, this is a bit more wobbly, with the animal rights movement. I think we had a bit of a better understanding what animal rights was. Now a lot of people think that animal welfare is animal rights, because often animal welfare is called animal rights, and that's always been a problem. We've never been able to differentiate animal rights from animal welfare, and Reagan complained about that, saying that there's a cross contamination. Half the time there's something in the thing, and it said, oh, Tom Reagan said that, and that was a Peter Singer quote, and vice versa. It meant that they were never able to differentiate their positions, and in the end, Reagan got frustrated. He called our dominant philosophy in our movement, utilitarianism, he called it morally bankrupt in that speech that I talked about. He got so frustrated by it because he just couldn't. In fact, I think he gave up. I think Singer gave up on the movement. And I think Reagan gave up on the movement. What I mean by that is they came to the conclusion that the movement wasn't sophisticated enough to understand why they were different.
Yeah. Do you, I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but I've never read Tom Reagan. I mean, partly the reason is that I feel like I get it now at this point. To sort of go through sort of an academic text about animal rights, I feel like would strengthen my knowledge. But I have not read The Case for Animal Rights. And I wonder if you like, if you were going to,
I think it's something different. I'm not sure if it'll strengthen your knowledge. I think it'll strengthen your claims making.
I see. Well, I was just going to ask, like, of all the texts, because like I said, it was animal liberation when I got in. It was, I guess, maybe, it probably wasn't too long after that I heard of Tom Reagan. But I'm wondering if someone was like their first text, would you hope that they read Reagan first, or which book would you recommend for people at the very beginning?
I always recommend 2001 Defending Animal Rights by Reagan,
I see.
and I don't actually recommend The Case for Animal Rights,
I see.
because
Interesting.
I mean it's 400 pages long for a start,
Right,
and
right.
it's very dense philosophically,
Yeah.
and that was another great advantage of Singer, because it was much easier to read, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
also had recipes and stuff like this. And so
Mhm.
if you put the two books together, one was a kind of academic tome, another one was a practical guide to vegetarianism,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
obviously veganism wasn't mentioned in Animal Liberation. And so I can get from a social movement position how the Singer thing took off and the Reagan thing struggled. But when the Reagan thing started to emerge, that's when I think that it was squashed down, because I think that animal rights is more difficult to sell than animal
Mhm.
welfare. Everybody is an animal welfareist. I mean, we've got weird kind of memes in the movement from my sociological point of view. This thing about you can't be an animal lover and eat them. Well, the culture of speciesism says that's exactly what you can do, and it's not even a problem, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
one of the main reasons is the fact that we orient towards our fellow animals in functionalist terms, which is what are they for? And you'll have heard that from non-vegans. Well, what are they for? Or what are we going to do with them if we don't do that with them, kind of thing,
Yep.
right? And all
Mhm.
they're not just beings in their own right. They've got to have. I mean, that some people think that antelopes are
Mhm.
for lions. Well, that's not what it's about. It just happens that lions predate on antelopes, but that doesn't mean that they're for them, right? And so we have this thing. Well, pets. The way that we use pets is we pet them, we give them names, we call them family members, we call them our fur babies and all this bullshit.
Mhm.
And then how do we use food animals? Well, the hint is in the name. They're food. They're
Mhm.
categorized as food. How do we use scientific models? Well, we do tests on them because that's what they're for, right? And
Mhm.
people think if they people were if our fellow animals are bred for something, then that kind of almost explains the morality of their use. And of course, it doesn't at all. It's the same as we do know, trigger warning, but we do know that there have been children bred on purpose to be sex slaves.
Mhm.
But
Right.
we're not going to
Right.
go, oh well, that's what they're bred for. That's what they're for.
Mhm.
There's no way you'd do that, right? And so
Right.
yeah, so we've got to think a little bit kind of deeper on these kind of questions, perhaps.
Yeah, I feel like it's timely for us to talk about this, and I'm going to ask you kind of a tough question. I don't know if anybody has the answer to, but I, yeah, I've seen this sort of creep up. I have somehow just completely avoided this like recent flare up of controversy, but I've seen some of my favorite activists talking about this. How they'll go on I don't know, YouTube or something, and then they'll get a flood of comments and from people saying you're doing it wrong, you're saying it wrong, and they've basically termed them like the vegan police. And it's really driving them up the walls. And these are people who are essentially, pretty solid boots on the ground activists. Um, and so there's been a divide, and the message is not gonna, it's kind of like people just tune out when they get fed up and someone becomes the other, or their enemy or something. So this sort of like, you're sort of like advocating a course correction in a way. And how do we, it's really hard to course correct. How do you sort of course correct in a way that doesn't put
Well,
off
I think
people?
I'm advocating reflexivity in the movement.
Mm,
Um, and in fact, that would, you see, you've used words like divided and this kind of stuff.
mm,
Um, whereas, I mean, division of ideas is not a bad idea. It's a question of how we kind of articulate them and deal with it. And going back to one of the very earliest things you said, sociologically, I'm not quite sure that people, a lot of academics will say that people have lost their attention span. And also, a lot of academics seem to be concerned that the general skill of comprehension is lacking now. And I definitely see that in discourse on the internet, on social movement, because sometimes people say things and I'm thinking, I don't know what that sentence means. And other people go, yeah, you're right. And oh, no, you're wrong. And I'm thinking, whoa, what am I missing? So I often write, and I've done this loads of times now, sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Can you clarify what you've just said? And more often than not, they never write back. It's as though as soon as they need to put it in another way, or it's like, can you write this down in not kind of TikTok language?
Right.
It's like suddenly they can't do it,
Right.
And so in a movement like that, where people seem to flare up and everything, and very quickly, and then you start getting ableist names and all. What happened to the idea of just us having a conversation with comrades? Now,
Yeah,
and I think that's what you're getting at, right? Is why can't we do that and not just go for the attack?
well, it wasn't more so like, why can't we do that? It's why can't we? It's like, how can we? One of the, I mentioned your conversation with Ronnie, and one of the things I like about your, your guys' banter, it's like something a very British thing, I think, where, you'll rib each other, it's something where like,
He deserves it.
yeah, people just get so sensitive, like I had on John Curtin, from Camp Beagle on my program. And one of the very first things he said was, he had the camera looking real close to him. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry to your audience." And then I was like, "Oh, well, they're used to looking at me." And he was like, "Yeah, you're no oil painting either." And like, people are so sensitive that I feel like that's like a source of, it's almost like respect in Britain to like go at each other in a way.
Well, it's kind of like taking the piss, whereas in US politics, they mean it when they're saying mean things.
Right.
Oh, you've got dementia, you're a moron and all this kind of stuff. Well, half the time it's said with a bit of a glint in your eyes in Britain, but not in the States, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was also talking about Barry Horn, John, how he said they used to fight all the time. And he loved that. He said, like, yeah, this is important stuff. Let's fight about it. I just wonder if, it seems like an oversimplification and stuff, but it's just that social media speak and text speak and TikTok speak, as you mentioned. It comes across with a kind of malice, doesn't it?
Well, it's inhuman.
Right.
Don't forget. And like, if you had these people in a focus group sat around a table, would they speak to each other like that? There's a good chance that they wouldn't. And so we're social animals. I mean, this is how, we function as beings in the world. We're social animals. We get cues off people and all that, sexual stuff, friend stuff, enemy stuff, and all that. We pick up on these minute little kind of things, kind of, oh, really, and all that. And I'm not sure you can do that online. And it seems to me that if you look back and you see these books of letters written by, Oscar Wilde to someone, and they write back and all that, it's almost like essay length letters going back and forth. And they're considered, they actually wrote it out. And so they considered what they say, and it's a bit like what happens in academia, or we used to. It's just kind of like, if you wanted to critique something, you'd first off saying, well, I really like the way that you put this, and that, that is a really strong point. However, now we don't do that. It's just kind of straight in there and kick him in the balls, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. It feels that way. And sometimes I think that people write a certain way and we're so primed to feel like it's an attack that sometimes things that aren't, like, clearly aren't attacks. We feel like, oh, how dare you? Don't question me.
It's like a question is an attack.
Yeah. It can be.
Actually, it can be just a question.
It can be. And I think one of the reasons why a question can be an attack is often it is used as an attack. I think, a lot of people maybe in the, vegan advocacy, like doing that online, will see that a question from, say, a meat eater often is meant as a deflection or diversion or attack. And, so that may be where people are primed, especially when they're getting it from people in the movement as well. But I posed that question to you just kind of with wishful thinking that you had the remedy, but I don't know what it is other than just talking.
It depends on what is the basis of them saying you're doing this wrong.
Right.
Because, is the question, well, how do you mean? Or is it, no, I'm not, fuck off? I mean, what, that would be a difference anyway. Is it kind of like, oh, well, tell me more, I'm open to learn, like, what am I doing wrong in your opinion? And more to the point, why? If they can't answer that question, then, it's just a kind of shallow, empty attack then.
Yeah. I think also maybe where some people will take great offense is just that if someone is doing activism, and maybe this is just in today's world, but they know that they don't have to, you know what I mean? Like they could be doing anything. And so when someone's trying to do what they can for animals and then they're getting criticized for it, I think people either very quickly become defensive or may even shy away from doing activism. I worry about that. And hopefully people are just tough and can power through it.
There's something, I think that's why people say things like, oh, well, I've been vegan for 25 years, this kind of, they're kind of showing their credentials and all that. I remember having conversations with people about Urofsky, and people were going, he's been vegan since so-and-so, and I go, oh, okay, and then he's been to prison, don't you know, kind of thing. And I go, oh, right, yeah, and all that. Kind of, I don't go back and say, yeah, but that was 77 days. I did 4 years, So, you can de-escalate things by just not rising to the bait.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that people often fall into, and especially me in early days, I felt like I had to respond to everything. You very quickly learn you don't even have to respond to when it comes to online comments. One, you don't have to read all of them. I mean, it's a good idea to kind of get feedback, but two, you don't have to respond to every negative comment. And I think a lot of people kind of get sucked in. I've seen a lot of activists like almost become consumed with the criticism. And you could get like 99 positive comments and get one negative one and let that one negative comment consume you. But some of the things that you're saying I think are pretty valid, and I'd like to see the movement. I use the word course correct. You said reflexivity and kind of reflect a little more. I'd like to see the movement steer in that direction too. And I just don't know how to get it there.
Well, Ronnie's got this concept called in-reach. Did he talk to you about in-reach?
I don't think so, no.
No, I don't think he did. But you see, that's where it's kind of like internal movement dialogue for educational purposes, between comrades. But the problem is achieving that. I mean, this is, there's a really interesting sociological discipline called ethnomethodology, and it's talking about how we are skilled as human beings, and so we achieve things. Like, for example, me and you have achieved, or at least we think we have achieved, a podcast so far, right? And so this is like an achievement between us, right? And there's turn taking going on and all that, and all the kind of niceties of kind of discourse and all the rest of it. But whether people are able to do it without losing their temper, it's a little bit like a version of Earthling Ed, where one of the main things that Earthling Ed gets is, oh, how do you stay so calm? I get that sometimes. How come you didn't lose it? I'd have ripped the guy's head off and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, what is the point of doing that? If you're an educator, you're the kind of lecturer and they're the student. What's the point of you losing your temper? you know more than they do. They're asking you questions, and then half the time, people get fed up of being asked the same question, which is understandable. But for the person, I mean, obviously some people take the piss, but for the person, that could be a genuine question, and it's the first time they've thought about it.
Yeah,
Even if it's just, well, what about protein and all that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that might be the first time that they've thought about it. Might be. And so there's no point. What's the point of losing your temper?
Yeah. That's good for me to hear, because I need to remind myself that sometimes, because I lose my, I mean, I don't lose my temper at people, but just more like in my head, I'm just so fed up with hearing the, the protein thing. But yeah, it's good reminder to sort of approach those questions with a little more compassion.
We're in for the long haul, right? And in some ways, we're in the advertising business. We've got to put vegan ideas. Like Donald Watson talked about, we need to ripen people up to a new idea. He wrote that in 1944, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But people need to be ripened up to a new idea. And of course, the new idea was veganism. And basically saying, it's not as though you can go veganism, which is why the people who regard veganism as a scare word and therefore avoid it, they're not ripening anybody up. Whereas, if you want people to understand what veganism is, you've got to talk to people about it, and they need to be exposed to it several times. And I think Ronnie said that again to you. Tom Reagan has got this concept called muddler. Do you know the Tom Reagan muddler thing? So he said that we all muddle along, and we gain information here and we gain information there, and then he said one day you look in the mirror and there's an animal rights person looking back at you, because your muddling has finally come to a conclusion. That vegan teacher had this thing,
the 100-point system,
100 clicks. Yeah.
Right.
And then my version of it is called jigsaw, which is that you're constructing a jigsaw, you're putting until finally you've got the picture. And the interesting thing about that one is, and I've seen this in some of the comments on your channel, which is that when people look back at the construction of the jigsaw, some of the pieces are bigger than others, so they remember those. Oh, earthlings. Oh, Gary's speech. Oh, blah blah blah. And sometimes what they say is that is the thing that did it, right? Forgetting about all the other pieces. It's a little bit more of a process.
Yeah, that's true. Because when I talk about earthlings, I often kind of oversimplify that story and neglect to tell a couple of stepping stones along the way that got me to earthlings. So yeah, it's always a bigger picture. And the term that I always hear, modern, as opposed to how Donald Watson phrased it, ripening people up, everybody says planting seeds now, right? You got to plant some seeds. And that's that sort of, point that we were talking about earlier about, sort of being okay with not seeing the fruition of your work right away. Like you may not, and I go back to the lady who turned me vegan. I credit her with, introducing me to earthlings, and she has no idea. And I love that story because it reminds me to be okay with not knowing the impact that you're having, which you just have to be. I mean, it's good though. It's good to sort of evaluate.
Jeremy, what do you mean that she had no idea? What do you mean by that?
Oh, I mean that we didn't know each other. I just met this woman in a bar and she recommended it, but she lived in a completely different state. I never saw her again. So she has no idea that she basically, maybe, like her action alone caused someone to become an activist. And hopefully, and I don't know my impact, but I'd like to think I've had some impact beyond, myself.
Yeah, every now and again, you do get to know, and some people come. I mean, we had a family came back to us once in Dublin and said, our entire family are vegan because of you.
Yeah,
I wasn't talking to me because of you, the group, and so that's quite good. I was at a local supermarket just about 5 days ago, and I was getting some milk thistle, and the woman was going, well, this one here, this one's pretty good, and this one's vegan. This one here is vegan, and all that kind of stuff. And we went back to the till after I'd chosen. She said, I knew you'd want a vegan one because I recognized you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so she recognized me from online, and it worked out, I think, that it might have been the I'm Right show, but I'm not sure.
Ah,
But
interesting.
so that was quite gratifying, but it doesn't happen very often.
Right,
You know,
right.
what it does happen often with is Gary Yourofsky, and I think it's almost a bit of a fad to say it. There's one prominent vegan who said Gary Yourofsky made me vegan, and then talked about 8 months after watching the speech he wasn't vegan.
Mm,
So that's the jigsaw again, right?
mhm,
He
mhm,
remembers the big piece,
mhm,
but
mhm.
it took eight months of other stuff. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I had this like, as much as I'm critical of the BBC, I remember hearing a story on the BBC about beef's climate impact, and so that kind of nudged me. I consider myself an environmentalist, and then I read this story from Rob Christensen, who is a political commentator in the state where I was living, talking about the Confederate statues being torn down, and he had argued that we may start tearing down the statues of meat eaters in 50 years. And I thought in my head, he's probably right. We'll start tearing down those statues. I don't think we will. I hope that'd be nice. But that was kind of one of those like little
well, in
clicks.
Britain we just cover them over with the sheets.
Yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right.
But
That'd be
it,
good.
it does remind me of an early thing with me is the fact that I was watching something called John Craven's News Round on the BBC, and it was a news story for children. So it just would pop up, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something,
Yeah.
and they were talking about the seal kill in the Orkneys, and I remember this sealer said, "We've got to kill the seals because they're eating our fish."
Right. Yeah.
And for some reason, that phrase got to me. And my reaction, what do you mean, our fish? And I thought, well, surely that just means that the seals got to the fishes before you did, right?
Hmm.
And so, so that was the start of my journey to veganism, in the sense that I started boycotting fish flesh and
Hmm.
still eating other types of flesh until I realized, hang on, there's no moral consistency here, kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was like a tumbler effect.
Yeah.
It started with fishes, and one thing that I'm eternally grateful for is I never went through a vegetarian phase,
Mm.
and I know quite a few people who kind of get stuck in that.
Yeah.
You know? And you still see it online. Oh, 20 years vegetarian, 5 years vegan.
Yeah.
15 years vegetarian, 3 years vegan, and all that.
Mhm.
And they're struggling.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't either. I was lucky that I got like that kind of jolt, which was my big puzzle piece was Earthlings. And so there was no, oh, I'm gonna do dairy. But I was sort of inching in that way where I would say, I'm trending more vegetarian, when I had heard the BBC story and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
so
actually, I
this is
think, like some people argue about this. I don't know what you feel about this, but some people say it's divisive to separate veganism from plant-based. I think it's extremely useful to do that,
mm,
because veganism is a philosophy, whereas plant-based isn't. And
mm,
so consequently, there's a lot of people who are calling themselves vegan, and actually they're saying that they're plant-based
right.
because they've never adhered to or even got to know what vegan philosophy was. And it's a bit sad, really. And I worry about this. It kind of keeps me up at night.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's probably a hell of a lot more plant-based people than there are vegans.
For sure. And they
If
call themselves vegans,
they will call themselves vegan, and then this is the movement thing again. We will keep talking about plant-based people who declare themselves plant-based. We will call them vegan if they're celebrities, like
Mhm.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. We insisted. It's like Singer. We insist these animal rights. We insist Schwarzenegger is a vegan. Neither of them claimed it. We
Mhm.
imposed it
Yeah.
for movement reasons.
Yeah, yeah. And then looked silly when they end up, eating a steak somewhere. Um,
Yeah, and then you
yeah,
go, "Oh, you weren't vegan. You were never vegan in the first place." And you go,
right. Like, yeah, they never said they were
"Yeah,"
vegan.
when they never said.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have this, you know, and I don't want to name this publication, but I remember this story that was so overstating. Like, I remember a story years back saying the NBA is going vegan. And it was because, you know, several of the NBA stars had gone plant-based. And there was at that time, it seemed like it was
This
a
is
trend.
basketball, is it? Basketball?
Yeah, basketball. Yeah. You know, and so a couple of the stars were going plant-based. And you know, we have a tendency to have this. I think it's a desperation, you know, for validation or you know, momentum or something. You talked about the need for wins and stuff, the need to celebrate something. I think that's part of it. We're such a celebrity-driven culture. I remember you and Ronnie talking about this on your Christmas podcast. How it's so true. We celebrate the wrong people. We should be celebrating, you know, the people who, you know, like I think Ronnie put it, or you put it, that, you know, are just, you know, clean up the
people who pick
trash.
up the trash. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because they're actually
I mean,
doing something.
the classic argument in that argument is, you know, you've got people kicking, you know, a ball of air around and getting £1 million a week, and you've got a nurse just about scratching a living, and yet, you know, look at the value of their respective jobs.
Yeah, completely skewed. Yeah, we just have this celebrity obsession, the celebrity obsessed world. And I think it's like, you know, not to go full psychology, but I think there's like an element of just escapism with it. Like people just want to vicariously live in that world.
Did you talk to Ingrid about that, Jeremy? Because I mean, obviously Peter are famous for chasing the celebrities, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think we got into it. I only had an hour with Ingrid. I would have loved more time with her, but we didn't really get into that.
Because one consequence, of course, is because McCartney would never go vegan, they kept plugging vegetarianism.
Right, true. Yeah. I mean, he had that beautiful quote about the slaughterhouse walls, but I mean, it's strange that he would not understand that the dairy cows are going to the same slaughterhouse. I mean, I don't really get that.
You know, sociologically and culturally, that's not right anyway. People would get that if slaughterhouses had glass walls.
Oh, right.
People would get used to it. When I was a kid, I used to live in a place in Otley called a place in Yorkshire called Otley, and we could just walk down to the local slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
You know, and there it was. You know, and there they are with rifles shooting horses. That's what I remember the day that I went.
Yeah, in a way, it would be maybe more normalized and maybe a more bloodthirsty world. Yeah,
I suppose some evidence for it is the fact that the kind of typical, stereotypical butcher's shop has changed. They used to have lots of corpses hanging. You'd get, you know, pigs' heads just sat there and all that. That all seems to be sanitized now.
Yeah, true.
You know, so, you know, and the thing about if you look at the sociology of food, the idea of removing the heads and trotters and this kind of stuff, except for fishers.
Right.
Because nobody gives a shit about fishers, and so you can leave the heads on.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Like there's that classic, you know, Christmas movie, Christmas Story, where they go to the Chinese restaurant and they enter the movie and there's the duck on the table, and the family doesn't want to eat the duck, and he said, because the duck's, he's smiling at me, and then the waiter chops the head off. He's like, oh, yay.
Yeah, problem solved.
Problem solved, right? Yeah, isn't that wild?
We sometimes, for all our alleged achievements, human beings can be so shallow.
Yes, yeah.
You know, so shallow.
It's very sad. Well, you know, circling back around to kind of wrap up the Tom Reagan, I'll link to some of his speeches below, because I did, you know, watch some of his talks, and they are some of the most beautifully spoken defenses of animal rights. I mean, his sort of like lectures, and I think, you know, maybe it's what you were referring to, this debate where he maybe have gotten up in front of like a symposium of people and given this.
Yeah, that sounds like the debate. And the opening statement is about 8.
Yeah, about 8 minutes. That's right.
I'll tell you a movement issue. AR Zone published that. I think it was about 8 minutes. But there's one which is 7 something. and that has got much more views. It's got millions of views, whereas this one has got hundreds of thousands or something. And when I checked out the Culture and Animals Foundation, founded by Nancy and Tom Reagan, right, found out that they were showing the short one, right. By the way, as soon as Reagan died, they appointed Peter Singer onto the board, by the way, but that's another matter. But I contacted them and said, why are you showing, you know, and they kind of said that they didn't know. But the thing that was a difference is that the bit where Reagan attacks utilitarianism and calls it a morally bankrupt philosophy, that bit was cut out, right, of the popular one. And I don't know how many people realize it, but Reagan was having a go at the movement by saying the movement that is the main, you know, the philosophy that the movement is mainly adhered to is morally bankrupt.
Wow.
You know,
So
and that seems to just go over loads of people's heads. That he said that, you know.
Well, I was very curious, like when you say like one's 8 minutes, one's like 7 minutes, like obviously just a tiny little part got cut out, and that's really
a little section. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
in fact,
interesting.
Andy Atkinson, you know, the vegan filmmaker, he's done a new version. He enhances things, improves the thing. The problem with Reagan, of course, is it looks dated, and it worries me that if people see, as it were, the original film, they're going to go, "Oh, what's all this boring black and white stuff?" You know, that kind of, you know, the kind of young person's reaction to things. And so, I'm not quite sure, because I call the one that we're talking about, opening statement 89, I call that the quintessential statement of animal rights. And the thing to emphasize for your viewers is that if you watch Reagan, a bit more dodgy towards the end for reasons we've talked about, but if you watch Reagan, you're getting animal rights. You're not getting animal welfare, which calls itself animal rights. And so, in other words, you're getting this idea that our fellow animals, they're rights bearers, they're rights holders, which means that when humans use them, that's a rights violation. There's no cruelty stuff, not even that much kind of animal abuse, this kind of stuff. It's kind of like rights.
Yeah.
See, it seems to me that the claims making of animal rights is much stronger because it's saying to people, where do we get the right to exploit these beings who are sentient? You know, and it's a kind of challenge, you know.
Yeah.
And the real problem, just to put my sociology cap on it at the moment, the real problem with the movement at the moment is that you've got this habit now of kind of going, look at this screen or look at this. This is cruel, therefore go vegan. Now you'll have seen that a million times, that construction. It doesn't work culturally. It doesn't work. There's no cultural connection between that is cruel, so therefore I must go vegan. That connection is not there. So if we then try to create that connection, you're then in the welfare paradigm arguing about what cruelty means and all the rest of it. And people say, well, why can't we just reform it? Why can't we? You know, surely the RSPCA will stop that. You know, blah blah blah. Where's the American Humane Society and all that kind of stuff. You're getting all bogged down with that. Animal rights cuts through all of that and doesn't even go there, and just goes, we want you to consider that our fellow animals are rights bearers. And so that means that when we use them, we're doing wrong by them, you know. And it's not a question of the level of cruelty. It's
One kind of
using them.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't remember if I came up with this or if I heard it from somebody, but I feel like it's a pretty elegant way of putting it that, you know, in the word abuse is the word use. Now, I don't know if that's, you know, part of it, but when people would be, you know, arguing with me about, no, and here we do it this way, we kill this way, or we treat the animals well, you realize very quickly, if you're paying attention, you're sharp, I guess, that you have to deal with that question. You have to deal with that. And the answer is it's wrong because it's use, it's exploitation, it's using the animals, period. So, I mean,
and also, of course, cruelty and abuse, these are the favorite words of the RSPCA. So, so you're in the welfare paradigm for starters. But there is a style of outreach now, and there's several people doing it, which is they ask a series of questions, kind of, are you against animal cruelty? Yes. Are you against animal abuse? Yes. Can you give us an example of that? What do they say? What do they say? Cats and dogs and horses, right?
Right, cats and dogs, yeah.
And then they go, yeah, but what about the slaughterhouses and all that? And that's when the conversation goes, what are you on about? You've just been talking to me about cruelty and abuse. And now you're talking about slaughterhouses. That's a completely different thing. And they say that, those words, well, that's completely different. Because that is their socialization. And so you've got to, that's when the education, see, often these videos, when they get to that bit, then the activist goes, you're just an animal abuser, fuck off. Whereas that is where that's where the education should start, by saying, okay, well, let's look at this. You said that you don't like animal abuse and you don't like animal cruelty. When I bring up this form of animal use, you separate it out. Why is that? Get them to speculate on why they do that. And it's all to do with their socialization. And so that means it's to do with their culture. And that means we're talking about cultural speciesism again, our main target. That always comes back to that. If you get bogged down in the welfare paradigm, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah. Well, I have a worry. I want to pose this question to you because one of the groups, if someone were to ask me, like, what are some of the groups that are really getting things done in terms of developing activists, things like that, Animal Activism Collective is one of the groups that I cite often. Animal Activism Collective, Coalition Abolish the Fur Trade, they've been able to do so much with so few people. And one of the third party to this group is this group called ICAW, International Council for Animal Welfare, and they've been a strong ally. And people from ICAW are involved with multiple groups. And so one of the things that I've seen that I think has been really beautiful is these people who are often focused on welfare have been strong allies of the people doing the pressure campaigns, which, maybe also kind of like in that same kind of track of like, not vegan advocacy, basically. But one of the things that I worry is if we use the word welfarist as a pejorative, because it can come across that way, the risk of losing strong allies like ICAW. Because I would argue ICAW has been, understatedly influential in a lot of.
I think there's a solution, and this is it, which is when Watson wrote his first vegan news. This is November '44. He called vegetarians the lactose, right, and which was a bit of a pejorative. But the general feeling amongst the vegans was that we need to attack vegetarianism, but not vegetarians. And so it's the same. It's the same. So there's a problem with welfarism, but a welfarist is some kind of something else. So long as you can be nuanced about it, I think you can get around that problem. Because if you say, well, look, I'm talking about animal welfarism, the thing that we're socialized into, the things that they would say the same. People call it brainwashing. Oh, we're brought up with everybody, all kids are told don't be cruel, and all that. And then eventually they're told, yeah, but that doesn't mean that we can't eat them, right? And so that's what they bring to the vegan table. I'm against cruelty, but that doesn't mean we can't eat them, And so that then is the start of a conversation, not the end of it.
Let me ask you this, because one of the things that we've been seeing with these groups is, say, this group joins the fur protest, this group joins the cage-free protest, for whatever, and they're helping each other with their campaigns. So if we criticize
alliance politics,
yeah, right.
So in other words, you say to the welfare group or whatever they call themselves.
Mhm.
I mean, there was in Britain there was the same something called CORE, Coordinating Animal Welfare. It was made up of vegans, right? And but if you got an alliance, because I've seen you with the interview of the fur trade thing, and by the way, just as an aside, I'm not opposed to that campaign at the fur shops, because that is the demand side stuff. My problem is the supply side stuff, which someone like Jake would defend because they want to attack the supply side. But I think that, if the demand is still there, you've got a major problem.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that in your history about prohibition and stuff, right? So
Right.
that alliance there between the two is just an alliance. But if somebody comes along and says to the the fur people, well, are you an animal welfare group? And say, oh no, we don't go for that, even though they're in an alliance with it, because again, it depends on them being able to say what their position is, and the other parts of the alliance just have to deal with the fact that there's going to be different claims making about the same thing. And if they can't deal with it, then they shouldn't form an alliance.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of curious though, like, do you view initiatives that they're working on, like say a cage-free, like one of the things that ICAW is working on is holding Marriott hotels accountable for their cage-free commitment, which they were negged on, which, by the way, already there is kind of a black eye on this, in the sense that companies may make promises and then just renege on them. But I wonder if you think that that's a valuable thing for them to do. And I'll just give...
It's not a valuable thing for vegans to do, but I mean, if they want to do that, but also, I mean, what do they mean by cage-free?
Yeah. Well, I think that's, interesting because, we've seen what cage-free looks like and it's horrific. So, I'm going to talk to them myself, have a conversation about it.
When I came into the movement, Jeremy, the campaign against battery cages was already running.
Yeah.
And the main group was Compassion in World Farming, right? And that was set up in 1967 by two dairy farmers, right? So it wasn't a vegan group, it wasn't an abolitionist group, but it didn't pretend to be the same as the RSPCA. They don't pretend to be those things, right? And so what they didn't foresee was that the farmers, and this is the problem with all the laws, these loophole things, is that they would then go, okay, we're going to abolish the battery cage, the barren battery cage, and we'll make them into enriched battery cages. And so they kind of did a sidestep around the campaign, and so they had to start again, right? And then you have some problems where, if you're not quite sure what you're doing, you're creating some problems down the road. For example, controlled atmosphere stunning, which we call the gas chambers, right? Now, Peter campaigned for them. They campaigned for the gas chambers, right? And they particularly they declared a victory in Canada because they got KFC to use gas chambers instead of the traditional way of slaughtering chickens, right? And of course, then you find all the welfare problems down the line, and that now they'll be very critical of the gas chambers, I'm sure. I mean, I haven't checked, but you can almost guarantee that they will be. And so there's something that they campaigned for on welfare grounds, and now they're campaigning against what they got on welfare grounds.
Yeah.
I always say that regulating atrocities is an extremely messy business, and that's what it's proved to be. Whether you talk about human rights, animal rights, if you try to regulate the way that people do atrocious things to each other or to others, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
The only safe way is abolishing it.
You know, I haven't really like studied the issue extensively, but I've heard the argument made by, you know, multiple people that um, some of what the welfare reforms end up doing is giving the industry ammunition to say, well, we're high welfare. Do you think that like say what so say cages, say battery cages were banned, say enriched battery cages were banned, and then they had the sheds, you know, full of birds, you know, pecking at each other, you know, dying on the
Mm,
floor.
mm.
Would you say that that has allowed them to say, well, you know, we're cage free, you know, and in a way like help them market themselves? Do you buy that argument?
Yeah, it's been a problem, and of course, Francione has pointed this out over and over again. Is that once they go cage free, they then get an award from the campaign group
Mm,
and endorsements. I mean, for several years there was a PETA endorsement of Taco Bell for going cage
mm,
free. You know, they gave an award to Temple Grandin for designing slaughterhouses, right?
right.
And so it's a slippery, messy business once you
Hmm.
get into it. You know, what bit are you gonna praise? What do you think is okay? Is that a compromise kind of thing? And nobody knows the future.
Yeah.
But in terms of before abolition and after abolition, there seems to be a fairly solid dividing line between those two.
Yeah. Well, you know, I, I know this is kind of your passion and interest, so we've talked about it some, but we really haven't talked about your story as much. Like, I kind of want to get into your story some. You know, we've talked about your prison sentence. I know you were talking about with Ronnie that you guys spent time in the cell together.
Yeah,
That must have been hell for you.
it was. It was. I'm still recovering now. That was worse than the injury.
Right. You take another batch to the face, you know.
Oh yeah, anytime. Yeah.
Well,
No, actually, we used to bribe our way into the same cell
oh,
every
really?
week.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, tell
because
me a little bit about that because I
yeah,
don't
so
even know the full extent.
when you're on remand, and we were on remand in a prison in Hull, which is kind of northeast England, and our case was based in Sheffield, which is in Yorkshire, South
Mm,
Yorkshire. So every week they would take us. It was really quite weird because like you would get a coach from the prison. Yeah, from the prison to the court, you were in a coach, right? Then you get re-remanded, and then you get put into one of those kind of battery cage type machines. And I don't know whether you've ever seen them, but it's like a prison transport thing. You walk
mm,
in the back, there's an aisle up the thing, there's individual cages, right? So you're put into
interesting.
individual cages, right, with a little ledge to sit on. And so the journey back to prison was always, you know, not as good as the journey out of it. But we were doing that every week because you had to have your case reassessed, and then, you know, if there's any bail applications, they would be made on a week by week basis,
Hmm.
and then they get refused, and then you get re-remanded, and then you go back. And so we would then go through reception, and we knew by then a few kind of the trustees, which were some of the other cons whose job it was to allocate the cells. And so you would bribe them with tobacco to put us in the same cell,
Hmm.
you know, because it was a
Yeah.
nightmare if you got put in with somebody else, you
Right.
know. I
Right.
mean, it was bad enough for me to be there with Ronnie, but I mean, you know, with
At
some
least you guys
fleshly
are
thing,
allies.
you know.
Yeah.
And I had that thing was I was in once with a non-vegan, and he was had a really kind of warped idea about what veganism was. It was religion and all this kind of stuff. And
Mm,
he was a long termer. Well, no, that's wrong. He wasn't a long termer, but he'd been in a long time on several short things. Right. Some people get very institutionalized. You know, some
mm,
people will smash a window just before Christmas in order to be in prison over Christmas because they
mhm.
can't cope with being out. You know, that kind of stuff. And he
Yeah.
was having a go. And for years and years and years, he had the same breakfast. He had porridge made with water. He had dry toast with either, you know, peeled plum tomatoes or baked beans or something on top. And he was having a right old go at veganism. And he was eating his breakfast. And I said, You've had this breakfast for years. And he said, Yeah. He said, Well, that's a vegan friendly breakfast.
Hmm. Hmm.
and he almost threw up.
Suddenly it doesn't taste good anymore.
He started to retch, and I was thinking, what the hell? You've eaten that for years,
Yeah.
and you put the label vegan on it, and because of your prejudice, it changes everything.
Right? Yeah. I've seen that play out with just family where they're like eating something and they're like, oh, that's vegan. And suddenly they want to spit it out.
Yeah.
Extended family, not my immediate
It makes
family.
absolutely no sense. People going, oh, this is good.
Right.
Like you must have seen the Sausage Man guy.
Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, this is the real meat. This is luscious. I could taste the meatiness and all that. And as soon as he learned it was vegan, he was going, well, it was like tissue paper and all that. Right. Completely switched. Right?
Yeah. So typical. He had a narrative, to speak on, I guess. He had to put out that pro meat message, I suppose. But what were you in prison for? I got some of the details, looking back in your past. But
the same as Ronnie. So it was conspiracy to cause arson, conspiracy to cause criminal damage, and conspiracy to incite others to commit criminal damage. So I actually got acquitted of number one. Because the case was based on these. Do you know about the incendiary devices? Yeah. Okay. Well, to this day I've never seen one, right? But in the court case, it was said that I was transporting them all over the country and everything, and I still have never seen one. The nearest I've got to an incendiary device is I've seen pictures of them. That's it, right? And so I got acquitted of the arson thing, which kind of, just technically, in fairness, that was correct. I got convicted of the criminal damage. I was kind of half guilty on that, really, and then I got convicted of the incitement one because I was a press officer, and we were so naive. It's really weird. I mean, you like this story, given your kind of journalistic kind of connections, is the fact that one of the journalists gave evidence in court, and they were saying, why does it say that when the press officers were talking, they say, we did this, we broke into this, we smashed this, and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, oh, well, that's just the sub-editing. When I was interviewing them, they were very careful to say they did this, but that doesn't sound as good in the newspapers. But the thing is, we did say we did this because we were very naive, we weren't sure about what we were doing. It was trial and error, and we didn't have the sense to kind of linguistically separate ourselves from the activists.
Right, because you were trying to be a spokesperson for them, essentially. Yeah, I saw the interview you did on the Green Scare pod with Riddick, talking about how a lot of times, and in your case, it's the people who are talking about it, who are sort of like more open about it, end up doing more time than the actual people who maybe committed the act.
It was in that case, yeah. I mean, because Ronnie and I didn't get. I mean, we'd all done stuff, but that wasn't part of this trial. So our part of it was all to do with the press side of it. And so the press people and the people associated with the press office got more than the activists. And the reason for that is that I think the state just wanted to shut us up. As I said, there was like 6 actions per day, per night going on. And I think they just thought, we've had enough of this. So they bring Sir Frederick Lawton, a law lord, out of retirement to be the judge. Now, he in the 1930s, he was going to stand for the British Union of Fascists. So that ended up being my judge, somebody who used to be a fascist, right? And I thought, that's good, right? And he would arrive at the court with his 2 armed bodyguards with their guns and all this kind of stuff. He arrived in a bulletproof car. And I mean, it's quite interesting. My recollection of the trial is a little bit sharper than Ronnie's, funny enough, because he was very good, this judge. I mean, his body was completely wrecked, but in his mind, he was very sharp. And he made one faux pas, he made one blunder, because when they were describing the incendiary devices, which were based on 2 firelighters. Now, I don't know whether you know what a firelighter is.
Just a lighter, basically?
No, it's kind of like a white block of stuff that's got kind of paraffin embedded into it.
Oh, I see.
I think it might be compressed paper or something like that, or kind of soft wood, and it's got petrol embedded into it. And when you put a match to that, it sets fire, but it doesn't burn quickly. So it gives time for the fire to start, right? So it's called a firelighter. And this guy goes, "Oh, firelighter, what's a firelighter?" kind of thing. And the guy's going, "Oh, well, my lord, it's," and he explained what the firelighter was. And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have one of those in my Chelsea bachelor pad," kind of thing. And there was a kind of fairly working class Sheffield, South Yorkshire mining town jury, and they were kind of going, "You stuck-up bastard," kind of thing. You could see them reacting, but that was the only mistake he made.
Interesting.
In the trial, and he was very good at directing things, bringing in information that they shouldn't have. There's a massive argument that went on about, because one of the most damning evidence against us, because it was a conspiracy, was the fact that they'd moved some people out of the flat, a ground floor flat, in order to put a listening device on the ceiling to listen to what was being said in the upstairs flat, which is where the incendiaries were being made. And they had this top secret, at the time, device. It was like a spider thing, right? So what they would do is they would drill a small hole through the floorboards, right? And then they would hang this thing just below it, and that would pick up what was being said.
Interesting, yeah.
Big legal argument about whether that made the audio, was that inadmissible. The reason for that is because they were saying, well, look, if you drill through the floorboards, that means that the tip of your drill went into the bottom of the carpet, correct? Kind of thing. And he goes, well, I guess it must have been. So that technically is burglary. So that technically means that evidence is dodgy, right? Because it's obtained in an illegal way at the time.
Yeah.
But of course, obviously the judge allowed it. And there's also a real big argument, because there was somebody from the MI5, which is, like CIA or the FBI. And he was called to give evidence, and he was very reluctant. And he said, I don't want to give any evidence about this thing. It's bloody top secret. We've just made the bloody thing, I think. And the judge goes, you tell me everything I want to know, or you're going to be in the cell. He had a major kind of argument with this poor guy. And so what they did is they put the trial into camera, which means that they kick most people out. The press have to go, the public have to go, some of the junior legal people have to go, just leaving barristers and that kind of stuff, the defendants and all that, and then of course the witness and the judge. And so it in other words, it's a means of cutting down the possibility of what the witness says getting out, because the press are not there, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of, I can't remember, it might have been Peter Young or someone who was telling me a story that they believe like there was this evidence that during a trial, I shouldn't say it was him because I can't remember, but they believe that they had gathered evidence in a way using this top secret government, method that they didn't want to talk about in court, and that a really astute lawyer.
Sounds the same, doesn't it? Sounds the
same. Yeah. And so it actually ended up helping them because they didn't want to talk about that. That's so interesting that how history repeats, because I'm sure this was something that I was talking about later. But yeah, but then you told Riddick too that you almost like got out, like the judge forgot.
Well, there was two other aspects to it, which was the fact that one day Screw came and says, right, Yates, pack up your stuff. you're moving to Liverpool, right? Because you're
Yeah.
on trial, right? And Ronnie was saying, of all the defendants, or the main defendants, if you like, you've not been convicted for anything,
Mhm.
which is really good in your favor. So I ended up back in trial in Liverpool, and they trumped up these charges that I'd smashed some travel agent windows because they had circus adverts in the window.
Mhm.
And I do know who did it, but it wasn't me, right?
Huh.
But there was an elderly naval officer with all his uniform on and everything, giving evidence against me because he'd seen me there when I wasn't even there. So I've always speculated, what did they have on this guy to get him to perjure himself?
Huh.
Because it was a blatant lie. In fact,
Yeah.
the person, because they said that I was driving the car, the actual person who was driving the car was a small woman.
Huh.
Right?
So
And
not even
so,
a chance of
no,
getting that
although I
that
suppose
wrong.
I did have long hair, but I had a beard then and all the rest of it. And
Mhm.
so, and all that. So I got enraged really. And there was a thing where you had this holding cell led into the dock where the court is and everything. And so I just thought, oh, I'm not listening to any of this crap. So I got up and I walked back into the thing, and the prison guard who would kind of come from prison with me, he kind of run back in. You can't do that. You can't do that. You've got to go back in there. You've got to go back in there. And I go, they're just telling lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go, no, you've got to go back. You've got to go back and all that. So I stormed back in, and I said to the judge, and this is something that really did get to me. I said, look, you don't know me. You're judging me, but you don't know me. I'm a good person, kind of thing. And
Mhm.
you don't know me. Like on your say so, any police officer would probably violently arrest me in the country, but they don't know anything about me, and neither do you. Said you're sat there, with your stupid little wig and your Batman cape.
Yeah.
You don't know me. And so anyway, I got an extra 14 days
for that little
for that
outburst.
little speech. Yeah. And I probably said this to Riddick too. As a punishment, I got put in with a trans woman. It's supposed to be a punishment. It was
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was so interesting.
I don't remember that actually. I don't think you shared that with Riddick. Yeah, that's an interesting kind of punishment that they would have thought.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I suppose if they thought, oh, straight guy is not gonna,
Right, not gonna like this.
because all the other cons are going, oh, pansy, and all the kind of pejorative kind of terms that you get.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
I was kind of fascinated, and this is weird sociologically, right? Is that this person, I can't remember her name now, but she had a shoebox full of love letters from the other prisoners.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And yet when we went down, because it was a slop out in those days, which means that you have to go to the toilet down the hallway kind of thing.
Mhm.
They were getting loads and loads of abuse, from the people who in other circumstances were writing love letters to her. And I was thinking, isn't this weird? Social
Yeah.
pressure, peer group pressure, and all that, so weird.
Yeah. Different era too. I'm sure back in the day, I guess it was not as widely accepted, although now trans people today are like one of the big punching bags of the in our
Absolutely.
country and
Yeah.
probably worldwide. It's kind of like gay rights advanced, and the backlash is like they couldn't come after gay people because I think and this is interesting. I tie this back to the vegan movement too, because you've talked about how important it is to kind of tie plant-based and veganism. And I think one of the big mistakes that our movement does is run from the term veganism. Like we should embrace that and be proud about it in the same way that the gay rights movement became loud and proud and then won their rights. But because the gay rights movement was so successful in getting gay marriage, it's like they couldn't go after gay people. So who do they go after? Trans people. It's like
I mean, they even reclaimed words like queer, didn't they, and stuff like that.
Right,
So,
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in fact, if like You can even, I think, you can even use the word queer, which I think when I was growing up, that was a pejorative,
Yeah,
and
me
these
too. Yeah.
days it's not a pejorative. I think
It was a little bit. It went through a process because that's queer meant that's just odd at one
right,
point,
right,
and then there was queer for meaning homosexual and this kind of stuff, and all the
yeah,
rest. Which is weird because the word gay went through this kind of. There was at least 3 meanings to gay. I remember I was practicing football this is in Wales when I was at university in Wales, and
mm,
I still got them purple tracksuit bottoms, right?
hmm hmm
This kid came up and he goes, "Are you gay?" And he goes, "I said, no, sometimes I'm quite grumpy." Right?
right, right,
And he was kind of backing off at this stage because he didn't know what that meaning was, right?
right, right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
and then gay became known as good. I think that's gay, right? It was started on the radio in Britain,
Oh, interesting.
calling something good gay. Oh, that's gay. In the same
Oh,
way as you've got, sick. People say sick as meaning
yeah, yeah.
good now, don't they? That's
Right,
sick.
right. Yeah, yeah. In
Yeah.
America, gay was always used as sort of like an attack. At least when I was like a kid, kind of growing up, they say, "Oh, that's gay," but people actually didn't really mean you're talking about homosexual. It was just like a term that people use. In fact, they used it sort of innocently, but of course, it carried this damage for the gay community, I'm guessing. Um, but yeah, these terms they go through phases and they get claimed, reclaimed, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's just an interesting side note. But no, actually, what I was talking about was the story that you told Riddick about how the judge, like, or someone almost forgot that you were part of the
Oh yeah,
case. Yeah, yeah,
I found this out years later by
yeah,
I was reading a zine which had mentioned me in the trial, and I'd never seen it before and all that. And apparently, what happened was because I went on the run, right, and so I got bail, and then I didn't return to court.
yeah.
So in Britain, that's having it away on your toes. It's called, right, which
Hmm
means you're on the run. And I went to work in an organic farm, and on the day that I was sentenced, the owner of the farm suddenly started shouting, "Hey, Roger, Roger," like this, and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Come on, you're on the telly," kind of thing. And so I ran into the farmhouse and they were talking about Ronnie getting 10 and all the rest of it and all that. And said one person who wasn't there was Roger Yates, and he got 4 years in his absence, right?
hmm
But apparently it transpired that they were just about to finish the case, and the judge was about to bang his gavel, and one of the prosecutor barristers went, "Oh, hang on a second, there's somebody who went on the run. You haven't sentenced him." So if he'd have gone bang, that'd have been it.
Yeah.
So I
So,
was like a second away from.
oh man. But then, what would Ronnie have done? He'd have had to be in there by himself,
Well, he
without
was
you.
because I wasn't there.
That's true for a while. Yeah. Yeah. Because
No,
he
but I,
got
I
what?
I never caught up with him. We were in a cell on remand together
Oh,
before
this different time.
before
I
conviction. Yeah.
see.
So I never caught up with him. He was I don't know where he was by then, but they kind of split people up. I mean, my best thing would have been as soon as I heard the sentence, I should have gone back, and then I'd have done my 4 years with people like Brendan McNally who got 4 years and stuff like that. Whereas when
Mm,
I did go back in the end, I was on my own, which
yeah.
was quite interesting. I got involved with education. The
Mm,
prisoners called me Mr. Vegan,
mm,
um, and there used to be a lot of weird stuff on a Friday because people would come in from induction, just like they spend a couple of weeks being inducted into the prison, and then they go to their proper wing, right? And
mhm.
they split up all the people in gangs and all that kind of stuff. There's a few fights, few knife fights, sorting all that out. And on a Friday, you'd get these kind of macho men kind of coming down the thing, kind of they're trying to set themselves up in the hierarchy, kind of thing.
Right.
And I was always back first from education, and so they'd come, And because they'd been in induction, they were dying for a smoke. And they go, got any tobacco, mate? I go, sorry, mate, I don't smoke. And so then they come back about 5 minutes later, just enough for one. So I still don't smoke, and then sometimes you get them coming around because a lot of them knew each other, and so then they go around and give them a bit of a tour and go, no, so who's that one then, kind of thing. So no, that's Mr. Vegan. He's all right. You leave him alone, right?
Oh yeah.
So I was kind of protected by
Interesting.
some of the other cons, because the guy who run the wing, the con who run the wing, he used to really like me because I used to finish his crosswords for him.
Nice.
So he'd call me into the cell and he'd go, I'm stuck. And he'd go, another word for boat, beginning with S, 4 letters. I said, ship. He goes, oh, yeah.
Nice.
He was kind of so excited about it.
Nice.
One day on the Friday, I was in his cell, sat on his bed. He was sat on his chair. There's a table, right? And on this table was a big pile of tobacco. This new guy came in and he goes, got any snout, mate? Kind of slang for tobacco. And he goes, sorry, mate, I haven't got any. So the guy looked down at this pile of tobacco and then looked back up at this other guy who was looking at him still. He goes, just enough for one. And he goes, well, I told you, mate, I haven't got any. And this guy looked down again at this pile. And I thought, Jesus, it's going to kick off, Yeah. And I'm sat there right in the middle of it, can't get out, kind of thing. And it was a question of, was this guy going to kick off or was he going to back down? And the newcomer backed down. So it all diffused.
I see.
Yeah, it could have been really heavy, but it wasn't, luckily.
Well, so in prison, they knew you as Mr. Vegan. So did you, while you were there, did you try your hand at outreaching other prisoners, or did you kind of stay away from that for safety?
I did that. We did that a lot. We did that a lot, funny enough, when we were on remand, because we were still getting all the press cuttings and stuff from the BWV sent to us. So we'd get a big envelope with all the press cuttings and all this kind of stuff. And then we'd also get a big pile of books, And one of the books that we had was the Hans Reusch one, Slaughter of the Innocent, the anti-vivisection one. And I remember one guy giving us a lot of lip. I said, well, look, read this, then you'll know, kind of thing. And we would give them out the book, the actually physical book, because I said, you can read, can't you? He goes, yeah. I goes, well, read this then. It probably wasn't a very clever thing to do. But when I was on my own after conviction, I was there was less opportunity to do that kind of thing. Also, because I was the only person with kids, I asked to be taken off the prisoner list because I was getting too much mail. And one of the screws says to me, "You're not doing your parole chances any good because you're getting all this animal mail." And I said, well, because he got some of that. I said, well, look, that's the RSPCA magazine. This is the Animal Aid magazine. It's got nothing to do with. He goes, well, you might know that, and I might know that, but the parole board are not going to know that, right?
I see.
Yeah. So some of the cons used to come to my cell, especially around Christmas and stuff, and it'd be littered with Christmas cards brought in, and because one of them, the person who actually did smash the windows that I got done for, sent me a postcard saying, "Thanks for doing my sentence."
Oh yeah, that's
which was nice. And then I got a big poster, and there's a TV thing called Rainbow, and there's puppets and stuff. And there was one puppet, the famous one I think, called Zippy. So it was a puppet with a big zip, and it said, "Dear Roger, please get out soon," and all spelt wrong, and all this kind of stuff. And this con came in, and he was looking at it, and he goes, "Oh God, you got a poster from Zippy."
Nice.
he took the character and sent me.
So you were getting good support while you were in prison, like a lot of letters.
No hostility.
Oh, I see.
And some.
Oh no, I mean from the outside,
a bit
from
of
the
protection.
movement.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned I don't know how personal you want to get, and I don't want to pry, but you had mentioned like a couple of marriages that you said like kind of the being in the movement cost you,
Mm.
and you mentioned kids and stuff. I'm wondering how uh, you know what the toll has been on your personal life, um and how and like I don't know I hate to frame this negatively, but do you have any regrets? Do you have any like feelings about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. It's a yes and no, but mainly yes. I think in the sense that I think that I've been so engrossed in the movement that other things definitely took a back seat, and that included the kids, which is not easy to say, of course.
Mhm.
It's also kind of true. But when I was in Liverpool, we had a support network where my kids and a couple of others were all together. It was a bit of a communal type situation, so it worked quite well in that sense. And
Mhm.
so I didn't really think that they were missing out in their early kind of times. And then of course when I got sent away, then they were missing out. And also there's a weird thing is when I went on the run, there was a time when I was living with the kids
Mhm.
under a false name, and they got used to calling me a different name.
Mm.
And it was really interesting the way that the kids are so flexible that they just took it on board, kind of thing. Oh, right, okay, we'll call you this now, kind of thing. And they never
Mhm.
called me dad and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And so I was this kind of person having a relationship with this woman who happened to have 4 kids, right?
Mm.
Two of which were mine, but
Mhm.
nobody knew that, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, so that bit was difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, my first marriage was a bit difficult anyway. But actually, the thing that caused the divorce, you'll never believe this, is I lost a camera. We had a good quality camera, and I went on this kind of demo organized by the Northern Animal Liberation League,
Yeah.
and I got nicked, and the coppers either broke or we misled the camera. So I got back after a couple of days in the cells. Where's the camera? I lost it, and I was in the doghouse,
Oh,
if we're allowed to
no.
say that,
That camera.
for doing that.
Wow.
And the next minute, I get you're a respondent in a marriage and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, in a
Wow.
divorce. And the weird thing is, what I hired the Sea Shepherd barrister to run my divorce case, and it was very unusual in those days. I got custody of the children, which was very unusual. The
Mm.
guy never did that, you know. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it turned out I was told later that my wife kind of gave them up
Hmm.
because she didn't want the responsibility.
Wow.
I know, yeah. So that was a bit messy,
So
but
you
that
ended up
was
raising them.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so I went to live with my mum and my sister in Yorkshire, and it was like a vegan household. My sister was
Mm.
vegan since '82, and my
Mm.
mum was vegan because she was living there, and
Right.
well, plant-based because she was living there. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And then everything was going fine. And then there was one thing where because I got arrested for fraud at one time because we did a demo in Liverpool
Mm.
before I moved back to Yorkshire, and it was a place called Devil's Tower. And what it was is when I talked to the press, because I was a press officer for all kinds of groups, HSA, I was doing the ALF stuff and all that, and but also other groups. I was always the press officer for it, and we used to use the name John Harris. I
Mhm.
used to have about 19 false names, including about 4 female ones. I remember
Mhm. Mhm.
Jill Lockwood was one, Sarah Dean was one, because somebody came up and said, "Well, how about Sarah Bean?" I said, "No, it's too much like soya bean. So
Yeah.
we can have Sarah Dean, but not Sarah Bean." So we went for Sarah. So when I got nicked in Liverpool for this demo, when I went with the name, I just said John Harris.
Mm.
So they wrote all that down. And then I went back to Yorkshire after being released on bail, I suppose. And next minute, we got the cops going, "You're arrested for fraud, for using a false name, you know, to the police," kind of thing. And the weird thing there was they'd brought some sniffer dogs, and they said, "So you might as well tell us where the explosives are." I said, "There are no explosives." And they said, "Well, look, these dogs will find the explosive. Don't worry about it. They'll even find fireworks." I said, "There are no explosives." So they took all the dogs all over the shop, didn't find anything. But my mother was stood there, kind of like almost like petrified, kind of thing. And then I got taken away. And my sister, years later, said that once I'd gone, my mum had a flashback about my father, who was a part-time police inspector. And he had a special pair of brown leather gloves, which he used to beat people up with because they didn't leave any marks. Right?
Wow.
And my mother had buried that until that day when I got arrested and taken away. And it suddenly came flooding back. One of those, you know, memory recall type things.
Right, right. Something you got kind of buried and
So it came back to her. Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah. Well, you know, it makes me more appreciative of you that you've gone through this personal tumult, you know, all for this movement for the animals, and you're still going. You're still going. I also love that you're protective of the movement.
Nothing better to do.
Same. But we couldn't do anything else, probably. Yeah. You know, well, you've mentioned some of the books, you know, what are some of the things that you recommend for people? And, you know, when I put, and I don't want to go too much longer because I worry about people's attention spans, but are there things that we didn't cover you think we should? And also, what kind of things do you want me to link down below besides your YouTube page, of course?
I think we should talk for a while about how great Peter Singer is, and put all his books down.
Yeah. There you go.
Actually, he's got a really good book called "How Are We to Live." That is cool.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Book. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, by the way, I do want to say about Peter. You know, he's been really kind and helpful to me behind the scenes.
He's a kind man. I wrote to him and told him about the Peter petition, and I was basically just asking Peter to stop calling animal liberation an animal rights book. They ignored the petition, of course. And I wrote to Peter Singer, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if he signed it, right? And he wrote back and he said, "Haven't you got anything better to do?"
That's pretty good. And here you have confirmed just a few minutes ago that you don't.
No. But I thought, well, you know, you're so passionate about not being called animal rights. I thought they'd actually go for that and actually go to Ingrid and say, "Look, you know, this petition, it does have a point, you know," kind of thing. But obviously that never happened. So
yeah. Well, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that I can do, because you've been so passionate about talking about Tom Reagan, like I said, is just link to some of his stuff. Also, the book you had mentioned, Defending Animal Rights, I'll link to that. And I should actually read that. You know, like I said, I haven't read any of Tom Reagan before. Yeah, and it is sad to me that some of his you know, sort of speeches came later. You know, I also want to say, Roger, like, I really appreciate you. Like, you know, I did that Keith Mann stream. I really appreciated having you in the chat. It was really an honor for me to have you there. You know, kind of sharing your experience with Keith as someone who knew him. And, you know, just having someone.
I first met him in Manchester because he was this kind of, I was in Liverpool, the Northern Animal Liberation League. They used to have these regional meetings in the town hall in Manchester. Never get away with it nowadays. And all the groups used to come to give reports to each other, and it was kind of networking, pre-internet and all that. And then this kid kind of turned up, and it was Keith. I think he was about 15 at the time, but you could tell straight away this is an ALF guy. You could tell by just looking at him, and just the way he kind of was, and the way he moved. You just thought, there's an activist here, kind of thing. He just kind of exuded it.
Right.
And
Like
I think the last
potential
time
or attitude or kind of thing.
is everything. His kind of being was. It spoke all that, you know.
Yeah.
And then the last time I was with him in London, because he invited me to this thing. He organized a press release, press conference about violence in animal rights, because that was a big talking point in the press. How violent the animal rights people are getting and all that. And when the press arrived at this press conference, there was 3 coffins and about 5 of us, right? And the coffins were in memory of Jill Phipps, and the 1st of February, when this might be coming out, that's the anniversary of her killing. And then there was the 2 Sabs, right? Tom and I slipped my name. Mike Hill.
Yeah, Mike Hill. That's right.
Yeah, and so so they were represented by these coffins, and then there was us. I mean, I'd been stitched up by the cops, and there was other people who got compensation from the cops. I'd got £4,000 compensation for the thing.
Yeah.
But of course, they don't admit liability, but they offer you £4,000 to shut you up.
Yeah.
And so that was the last time I saw him, actually. And I wrote a little piece in a magazine called Arc News. And yeah, that was it, really.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then I saw him. Yeah, tell a lie. I saw him just after his book was published.
Oh, the From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah. And so it's so funny. And he so he comes and he goes. I said, "Oh, brilliant! You're going to give me one of your books." He shut off. He got one of his books. Came back, handed it over to me, and said, £15. I had to pay for the bloody thing.
Yeah. I remember you saying that you didn't even get a free one. That's messed up. It's messed up, Keith. If you guys don't know, we're talking about Keith Mann, who passed away recently, sadly. It was this like kind of legendary ALF figure. But yeah, I've only talked to a few people who knew Keith. And he's the kind of guy who he was quite young, and he's the kind of guy who I know people talk about sort of in his later years. He kind of got it really conspiratorial. But
yeah, it was really sad, and you're kind of reluctant to go there, but it's all the Illuminati stuff and
and
all that. And then there was the thing about the tackling cancer and all that, and a lot of people don't know if that's real or not. So it's all very kind of sad in that way.
Yeah.
In the sense that as soon as something weird happens, you automatically kind of keep your distance a little bit, which is real sad,
Yeah, it is sad. And he's the kind of guy who I probably would have sought out at some point for this podcast and didn't jump on it soon enough, but didn't realize that, time was short. It's just kind of one of those reminders about, but
the thing is, he might not have done it.
Yeah, he might not have.
Because of that end part of his life.
Right, exactly.
I think that really took over, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if
all the videos that you showed on that live stream, I don't think that person was really around anymore.
Yeah, and that's sad. In fact, that one where he started to go into 9/11, and I realized I had pulled up like a couple of interviews that were more recent, and I realized this is putting people off, and I didn't want to have Keith go out like that so I ended up like kind of ending the stream shortly after.
It's ironic though, isn't it? Because the 9/11 one was the most plausible one that I've seen for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
The controlled demolition and all that malarkey. So.
Yeah. I know somebody who like would receive emails from him talking about it. But anyway, I don't want to go on about that. Rather, kind of remember him for the good that he did.
Yeah.
But all that just to say, like, it was such an honor to see you in the chat, and I'm really glad that you had joined. And it's been a real thrill to talk to you, Roger. And
that's very kind of you.
Yeah. So consider yourself welcome back on my program anytime. Is there anything we didn't cover that you think we should?
It's always hard to say after 2 hours whether we've covered anything. It's one of those things that'll come in 3 hours' time and say, oh God, we didn't mention this.
Yeah, we can always
yeah.
do part 2s, part 3s. And I really haven't done a ton of those, but I need to, especially because, you know, I realize like there's so much to your story that we didn't cover, we didn't talk about, and we could. So we could always come back and do it again if you'd like to. If you feel like
I worry that because I've always dissented myself, you know, like I mean, you might have seen sort of lives where Ronnie and I have never made any money out of the movement. In fact, you know, I mean, our money's been drained into it.
Right.
So I've never made any money, and I never sought to be a name. In fact, I mean, most of the time, like I say, we were going under false names. You know, and then if we did any press or anything, we had bloody masks on and stuff. We went out of our way not to be known.
Yeah.
In those days, I mean, you were talking to Ronnie about some of the iconic pictures, you know, and one of the most iconic one is an activist coming out of the lab with a beagle like this. Right? It's a very iconic one. And now I know who that person is, and everybody assumes that the person was male, because the ALF has got this macho image, which we didn't do on purpose. It's just that, you know, it was a time of IRA and all that, and everything. But that was a woman who was bringing the, you know, and I knew loads and loads of women in the movement, and of course, all for the press we had the masks on, so it didn't kind of get talked about. And Ronnie has talked about a couple of them now who have, you know, and that kind of stuff. But you know, the women have kind of been invisibilized a little bit in the history of the ALF. If you think about the main ALF people, you're probably going to think about men, but that's going to be a false picture. But it is a little bit like that in the movement in general too. You know?
That's true. Yeah. There. I mean, there aren't a ton of names that I think of when I think of the ALF. It's a pretty short list, and they are mostly men. And,
but then again, there's loads of people that's been through the ALF, who are still unknown.
Right. That you don't know, that I don't know, that you know. I mean, they say that about the ALF. It could just be your next door neighbor, little old lady walking her dog. That could be the ALF.
It could have been in those days, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of raids we could talk about, but that'd have to be another time. There's one in Scotland in particular, which was really interesting, because we used to have this image of being professional and all that, and really the ALF was pretty shambolic, to be honest. But on this occasion, because we were using loads of equipment from Sea Shepherd, it really was professional. We're using marine CBs and all the rest of it. But anyway, I'll tell you that next time.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, Roger, such a pleasure. And yeah, I hope everybody will, you know, go and check out Roger's page. You know, definitely check out that Still Alive podcast, because that's good fun. And you guys get into some real weighty topics too. You know, a lot of movement oriented topics too. And you know, kind of pour through them and kind of debate them in a way that's really digestible and hopefully challenges people as well. So I really appreciate you, Roger.
Yeah, because like you say, we kind of, there's a bit of banter, but we also don't fully agree with everything, and so we hash it out every time.
Yeah,
you know? And it's like a little bit like there was a famous football manager and said that if there's ever a dispute in the club, get around, we'd all have our say, we'd all talk it out, and then we'd decide that I was right in the end. So
that's right.
So that's what I used to do with Ronnie. We would have a big argument, and then we'd all agree that I was the one who was telling the truth.
That's right. That's right. I'm sure he came around to that as well.
Yeah, I bet you won't.
All right. Well, thanks again, Roger,
it's
and take
been
care.
A pleasure. You take care.
All right. You as well.